Chapter 793. The Grand Preceptor flew into a rage. You're pestering endlessly. I'm just stating the facts and not pointing fingers. Fang Qingtian snorted and said, I'm just stating the facts, but I'm specifically pointing out that history is a mirror to prove the rise and fall of the world. This is the way of the world. Now I'm going to work. Whether you come or not is your business. Anyway, if you don't come, I will report to His Majesty. If you slack off, I'll have to report it to my superiors. If you don't work, I'll have to report it. If you don't do a good job, I'll still have to report it. The Grand Preceptor's lips trembled in anger. Fang Qingtian, old fart Fang. You. Fang Qingtian raised his head. What about me? Isn't impeaching people the favorite thing you bunch of scholars used to do? Tian was sanctimoniously impeaching this and that, constantly mentioning His Majesty. This subject has a memorial. Will be the same in the future. Isn't it just a rumor? Who doesn't know how to do it? Don't want to work? How can there be such a good thing in the world if you want to get a salary without working? Fang Qingtian said loudly, From now on, we will be His Majesty's inquisitors, the imperial censors and imperial censors among the generals. If there's anything I don't like, I'll just report it. That's all. The Grand Tutor was so angry that his beard trembled. Fang Qingtian strode away. Are you coming? Are you coming or not? Go. Then what are we waiting for? But this job is tedious and complicated. How can a few people finish it? No one stopped you from finding someone else to do it. But where can I find people? Why didn't you look for him? You are the person directly responsible for this matter that His Majesty appointed. If you don't find someone, you will be slacking and defying the imperial edict. This will be the first thing I will say when I want to impeach you. Do you think I wouldn't dare? You. The Grand Tutor almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He was one of the 3 hooligans in the capital. The treasured blade was not old, it really was not old. Me too, I want to accuse you as well. This old man has seen all of this with my own eyes. I won't feel good if I don't spit it out. Zhou Jianhan jumped out. Well said. I'll impeach him too. Leng Daoyin said. In the future we will also report our matters to this memorial. Impeach him every day. Yes. The 3 biggest hooligans of the capital attacked together. No one could stop them. Who could compete with them? The civil officials' mouths and eyes were crooked. Looking at these old hooligans who were becoming more and more aggressive, they only felt speechless and depressed in their hearts. Brother, are you really going to start the martial sciences again? Yun Xiaoyao asked in the palace. Of course. Not only do I want to open it again, I want to open it with super high treatment. His Majesty said, I have set up a strategy of 3 generations of emperors to completely control Yutong's martial arts and reign supreme in the world. Let all martial artists in the world accept the martial sciences and be proud of it. If that's the case, then I'm afraid that the incident of the hero breaking the law with his martial arts might really? Yun Xiaoyao said worriedly. We don't do that now, but are there fewer cases of heroes breaking the law with their martial arts? The emperor asked with a smile. This? Yun Xiaoyao was speechless. Indeed, this kind of thing would happen no matter when. Since there's no way to stop it, then let's clear it up, the emperor said. Rather than blocking it, it's better to open it up. Yun Xiaoyao replied, What my royal brother says makes sense, but why did you say that it was only a strategy for 3 generations of monarchs? This is a matter of national importance that will ensure long-term stability. The emperor glanced at him with a smile. After 3 generations, more than 100 years will have passed. His voice was distant. By then, basically all the heroes in the world will have been recruited by the martial sciences. By then, it will definitely become a situation where the imperial court's martial sciences will control the martial world. And after 3 generations, how much of the martial world will still exist? By then, the existence of the martial sciences will be a waste of manpower and money. As long as the martial sciences are suppressed to a level that the country can bear after 3 generations, that will be the national policy for 10,000 generations. Only when there is not much difference between the civil and the martial, only when there is a conflict of occupations and not a great disparity in strength, will the era of true unification come. By then it will truly be, that all under the heavens belong to the king, and all who lead the land belong to the king. Now, these 2 sentences are only a reflection of the moon in the water, nothing more. The emperor was obviously in high spirits as he spoke more thoroughly to Yun Xiaoyao. I see. Yun Xiaoyao could not help but sigh in his heart. Was the path of martial arts still so difficult? Would there never be a day of success? This is the art of an emperor. The emperor patted Yun Xiaoyao's shoulder. Brother, the emperor has no right to have personal preferences. Yun Xiaoyao did not speak. After a long time he sighed in melancholy. I'm afraid I can only entrust the matter of annihilating the school of Kismet State to both of you, Yun Yang said with a flushed face as he walked out of the palace. Dugucho asked curiously, why don't you go? It's not a problem for the two of us to go, but without you, we won't have a legitimate reason to go. Yin Yang smiled. It's still not suitable for me to appear in public for now. The Four Seasons Tower's manpower has most likely arrived in the capital city. If I were to expose myself, I'm afraid it will accelerate the deterioration of the situation and the consequences will be unimaginable. I've already sent a message to King Yun about going out without a legitimate reason. He, Bai Yishue Fang Mafei, and Lao Mei will assist the two seniors to annihilate the school of Kismet State. It's perfectly justifiable and logical. Dugucho wanted to say that Yun Yang could turn into a cloud or disguise himself as someone else. Why would there be so many concerns? Yun Yang had already used a similar tactic once, but he did not speak after some thought. Ling Xiaozue said from the side, even so, the matter of annihilating the school of Kismet State is still troublesome. After all, not only do we have to eliminate the members of the school of Kismet State who have come to the capital city, we have to destroy the school as well. Is this what you mean? Yes, said Yun Yang. Ling Xiaozue smiled meaningfully. I'm afraid there will be more twists and turns in this matter. The school of Kismet State has been claiming to be the legitimate successor of Kismet State for so many years. It has even tried its best to help the continent's overlords unite and some sovereigns build their own nations. There must be a significant reason behind this. Don't you want to know these details? Yun Yang smiled and said, Senior, you're right. This is indeed another reason I don't want to go. He paused and said, there are some things that are best left untouched. It would be best to cease to exist in this world from now on. Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho exchanged a glance. Feeling Yun Yang's meticulousness, they nodded in agreement. The annihilation of the school of Kismet State? Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, I'm guessing that the school of Kismet State must be hiding secrets, many secrets. Looking at Ling Xiaozue and Dugucho he smiled. However, I'm not interested in knowing any of these secrets. Ling Xiaozue took a deep breath and said in a low voice, I understand. Dugucho's face was filled with admiration as he looked at Yun Yang, a little touched. What Yun Yang had done was equivalent to gifting the countless resources and secrets that the school of Kismet State had accumulated for tens of thousands of years to the two of them. Stones from other mountains could be used to improve jade. What more, top-notch cultivators whose cultivation base had already reached their level. Chapter 794. If there are any gains, it will definitely involve closed-door cultivation. Yin Yang smiled. Yun Yang wishes both of you a smooth breakthrough first. Ling Xiaozue said in a low voice, we will rush back as soon as we can before your battle with the Four Seasons Tower. The Four Seasons Tower is also our nemesis. You are not the only enemy. Yun Yang smiled but did not speak. Now that we are about to part, Yun Yang has another gift for both of you. Perhaps it will be of help when the time comes. Yun Yang flipped his wrist and a purple aura rose from his palm. It was 2 purple crystals. Holding them in his hands he gave one to each of them. Just coming into contact with the comfortable aura of the crystal stone, the two of them already felt refreshed. When they clearly saw the true appearance of the crystal stone, their expressions changed at the same time. Their eyes suddenly shot out a bright light, that kind of surprise, it was impossible to conceal that kind of feeling. Could this be the legendary Eastern Amethyst? The legendary Eastern Amethyst that can transform a cultivator? The two experts' eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets as they exclaimed in shock. Even their faces paled, their hearts pounding so hard that they almost jumped out of their throats. Even with their almost unruffled cultivation base and temperament, they could not help but be shaken by the 2 purple crystals, their realms destabilizing. This was a legendary item that very few people had ever seen in countless years. Just this one piece alone would be worth more than a city if it was converted into wealth. It should be said that if they had this item, they would never exchange it even if others were to use the wealth of an entire country to exchange for it. The Eastern Amethyst. There was another saying that was passed down through the ages. It was called the Stairway to Heaven. As the name suggested, with this so-called Eastern Amethyst, it was equivalent to having a stairway that could directly ascend to heaven. This was also the origin of the item's other name. No. This item is too precious. Both of us can't afford it. Even though the two of them were extremely reluctant to part with it, even drooling with desire, and the desire in their hearts was like a raging fire that was difficult to suppress. The two great experts still suppressed it with great difficulty, and opened their mouths to refuse. This item was not an ordinary treasure of heaven and earth. Once he accepted the favor, he would owe too much. Of course, the most important thing was that Yunyang might not know the true use and value of this item. If he were to regret it in the future, everyone would be in an awkward position. In that instant of conscience interrogation, Ling Xiaozui and Du Guqiu felt that if they had given such a thing away, they would probably regret it for the rest of their lives. They would definitely be plagued by inner demons. So this thing is called the Eastern Amethyst? Yunyang was hit with a sudden realization. That's a pretty name. You actually don't know? The two of them laughed bitterly. If that's the case, then all the more we can't accept it. Yunyang chuckled and said, how can I not know that both old brothers are treating me so generously? Although I don't know the name of this item and I don't know how effective it is, I really don't lack this item here. Although I don't have a lot, I have at least a dozen pieces. As the saying goes, the rarer an item is, the more valuable it is. I've given both of you one piece each and I've left a dozen pieces behind. It's only right that I give both of you one piece. 10 dozen pieces? Both of them stared at each other, their voices changing at once. Even if there was only one or half of such a highly coveted treasure of heaven and earth, an immortal item, it was already a source of great fortune. He had given away 2 pieces with just a wave of his hand, and he still had a dozen pieces with him? So many? If it were not for their extraordinary composure and clear state of mind, they might have grabbed their weapons and robbed Yunyang. Yunyang nodded seriously, indicating that he really had more. The saying that the rarer an item was, the more valuable it was not an excuse. Yunyang thought to himself, if I were to tell you that I still have a few 100,000 pieces of this item, will I be robbed on the spot? Giving 1 or 2 pieces to a good friend from a dozen pieces of good stuff was a sign of loyalty. If one were to give a piece of a few 100,000 pieces to someone else, it would be a shameful act. No matter how precious or rare it would still sound bad. This was the truth no matter where one went. I've actually distributed this item a long time ago. Not only do the two of you have it, King Yun, Bai Yixue, Lao Mei, Fang Mafei and old disciple Chou, Yunyang smiled. Each of you has 1 piece and I've kept 2 pieces for myself. You don't have to be so courteous. Only then did Ling Xiaozui and Du Guqiu accept it sheepishly. Just as they accepted it, they hurriedly kept it into their spatial rings. As the item fell into their pockets, both of them still felt like they were dreaming. How could he have gotten his hands on such a precious item so easily? This is too unreal? It was said that whenever such an item appeared, there would be a bloodbath and a martial world calamity or something. Shouldn't tens of thousands of lives be sacrificed first to see the results and put an end to it? Even if there was only 1 piece of this item, it was already not inferior to the 17th master of the Abyss's dragon-hide treasure map. The previous martial world calamity had taken the lives of tens of thousands of people. But in front of him, what was going on? As the saying went, pies falling from the sky. No, it should be immortal pies. Could it not be more than this? Yunyang, you have to be careful in the future. Ling Xiaozui warned him seriously, don't simply use it. Don't let anyone know that you have this item, especially when you reach the bound of universe in the future. Use it as soon as possible if you can. Really, this item contains the traces of Tao and even the secrets of primordial chaos. Remember, be cautious. Don't worry, I understand. Ling Xiaozui and Du Guqiu did not waste any more time. They quickly found the school of Kismet State's base and slaughtered everyone there, not even waiting for Yun Xiaoyao, Bai Yixue, and the others. The main reason was that Yun Yang's generosity had shocked both of them so much that they were a little dazed. There was also an inexplicable excitement that drove them out of the city in the middle of the night to annihilate the school of Kismet State. When they were 7,000 miles away from Tiantang City, they still felt a little dazed. He gave it to us just like that? Du Guqiu felt that his brain had been working at its maximum speed. He was inexplicably excited, so excited that he dared not believe that reality was real. Yes. Ling Xiaozui, who shared the same sentiments, had the same impulse to take it out and touch it in his palm to feel its true existence. No matter what, the two of us still owe him a big favor. Du Guqiu sighed. Although it was a sigh, the excitement and joy in his voice could not be contained. Who says otherwise? Ling Xiaozui sighed. I'm the same as you. First, I'm surprised by his generosity. Second, I'm deeply impressed by Supreme Cloud's way of doing things. It's really extraordinary. Oh? What do you mean? Asked Du Guqiu. Do you feel that you're closer to him? That you don't actually feel that you owe him too much? Asked Ling Xiaozui. That's right, of course. Du Guqiu said, but there's still a sense of gratitude. As for the other things that you said, I really don't owe him. Of course. How can it be so natural? You've accepted such a dreamy item that only exists in legends, yet you're calm about it. Other than being surprised, you don't have many other thoughts. What do you mean? Asked Ling Xiaozui. Duguqiu was stunned. Yes, why did he not feel that he owed Yunyang much when he accepted such an immortal opportunity? Thinking about it, it did not make sense at all. Chapter 795. Don't you understand? Do you really not understand? This is only a situation that Supreme Cloud has deliberately created. Ling Xiaozui sucked in a soft breath, his gaze unusually distant and deep. You and Yunyang have only known each other for a short time. Supreme Cloud has his own way of doing things, there's no need to create a gap. Ling Xiaozui said, the reason we feel this way is all because of him. What do you mean? All along since we first met, Supreme Cloud has always been the weaker party in front of you and me. Now we've acknowledged that we're on equal footing. Is that true? More than that. Duguqiu chuckled humorlessly. Now I always feel like I'm centered around him. All along while we've been helping him, we've also been receiving benefits from him in return. Have you ever seen anyone reaping without sowing or simply receiving without putting in any effort here with Yunyang? I really haven't. Everyone has their own responsibilities doing their own things. Even when they occasionally cross paths, there's no chaos at all. That's right. Including us. We have been helping him all this time. Even though our original intention was to help him advance, we did not ask for anything in return. However, he has been repaying us in all kinds of ways, including sparring with us. Do you think that he really needs it as badly as we think? Is he the only one who's improved through sparring? Other than the first time, he did need to consolidate his cultivation base and refine his martial skills, but the sparring twice a day after that exhausted him to the point of exhaustion. It's not necessary for him. I can say without reservation that what he's consolidating is only his foundation, but what we've received is a limitless path forward. Every aspect of our bodies, cultivation methods, and deific consciousness have improved because of it. These benefits are absolutely unnecessary for him. Twice the work but half the effort. That's true. Come to think of it, we've long accepted his grace unknowingly, leveling both our positions to the same level. Including this time when he asked us to annihilate the school of Kismet State, we had to deal with it, but he promised us all the benefits of the school of Kismet State. He didn't touch a single drop of it himself. On the surface, this is what we deserve. We've annihilated the entire school of Kismet State. Who else could those things belong to if not us? But if he goes with us, can you swallow your pride and snatch something from a junior? Moreover, he was standing on the righteous side. As long as he went, at least 80% of these things would be his. Do you approve of this arrangement? It's not just approval. It's fine even if they all end up in his pocket. If that's the case, it's not unreasonable to say that these things were given by him. Yes, but this isn't enough. It's not enough to compensate for our help in dealing with the Four Seasons Tower and Shimen Huanyu today. That's why he took out the Eastern Amethyst. I'll make up for all the favors and debts in one go. In fact, it's much more than that. Another result of this action is to establish his new position. His address has changed from senior to brothers. As for us, we don't feel that it's out of line. We only feel that it's appropriate. He never takes the initiative to give anything to anyone for no reason, but he will never mistreat anyone who helps him. This is Yunyang's way of doing things. Just like how he gave me the Rainbow Fairy in the past, it's still within this logic. Maybe he did it intentionally, maybe he didn't, or maybe I've overinterpreted it today, but there's indeed an extreme balance around Yunyang. You'll get what's yours. It's just wishful thinking even if you think about what's not yours. Such an ability is too heaven-defying. Supreme Cloud of the Nine Supremes, Supreme Think Tank of the Nine Supremes, he truly lives up to his name. Unknowingly he's become everyone's core, Duguqiu exclaimed. Thinking further, this includes the four popinjays of the four noble families. Although they eat, drink and play every day, none of them dares to neglect Yunyang's orders. There's also Feng Mafei, Lao Mei and the rest. They all have their own duties. Sometimes they'll get it in advance, but they'll never get it for free. We'll still have a lot of time to spend together in the future. Ling Xiaozui concluded, this is an extremely balanced and well-behaved person. Perhaps he hasn't realized it yet, but sometimes, we can't take advantage of our seniority. I'm increasingly convinced of Gu Chaoyang's words. The Oracle of Heaven's telling is indeed flawless. He had said a lot, But the last sentence that seemed to be a sigh was what Ling Xiaozui truly wanted to say today. It lingered for a long time. Dugucho was silent for a moment. It was obvious that he had understood something, but he did not want to say it out loud. Let's go. Ling Xiaozui changed the topic immediately. Let's settle the school of Kismet State as soon as possible and return to the capital. I guess. The day of Yunyang and the Four Seasons Tower's final battle is not far away. We can't miss this battle. Perhaps this will be our last battle in this world. All right. However, Old Ling, I feel that Yunyang's handling of the school of Kismet State is a little unexpected. You mean? Why didn't he consider using the method of driving the tiger to swallow the wolf? Ling Xiaozui asked with a smile. That's it. Even I feel that the school of Kismet State's power can be completely used to deal with the Four Seasons Tower. Why didn't Yunyang think of it? There must be another reason behind this. We're not the think tank. Why should we think so much? Ling Xiaozui guffawed as he soared through the clouds like a bolt of lightning, moving as fast as the wind. The higher-ups of the school of Kismet State were all executed and the school was annihilated. However, the storm they had stirred up was far from over. At least, the residence of Yun was still crowded with people, sweating profusely and overcrowded. A gust of wind hovered in the sky for a while, observing for a moment before it left. At this moment, Lao Mei was the only one left in the residence of Yun with a bitter face. Well, he was not really the only one. There was also a group of newly recruited guards scattered all over the place in charge of receiving and guiding the visitors. However, this welcoming task was extremely tedious and troublesome. Yet, they could not lose their temper. Not even the slightest inappropriate expression could be seen. As long as they did not receive the guests properly, they could be considered to be putting on airs and oppressing others with their authority. At the heart of the storm, the slightest bit of disturbance could cause a great deal of trouble in the future. As for the others, the four noble young masters were the first to see the opportunity, escaping with their guards at once. Fang Mafei and Bai Yixue, master and disciple, could no longer continue after the first day of receiving the guests and disappeared without a trace. Yun Xiaoyao had been staying in the palace for the past few days and did not return home. Bauer had followed him to the palace for a short stay as well. Ji Lingxi had gone to stay at Shengguan Lingxiu's house as well. Although Lady Ji was delighted that her sweetheart was popular, admired, and respected, the degree of greeting was far beyond what she could bear. Besides, her staying here was too big of a target. Chapter 796. Lao Mei was the only one who realized in shock that he was the one with the worst fate. By the time he realized that these people were gone, it was already too late for him to escape. He, the major domo of the residence of Yun, was the only one left in the entire residence. He had to take charge and deal with everything on his own. This was truly a case of a single tree propping up a skyscraper. However, this housekeeper felt like he could die of exhaustion at any time now. Looking at the pious crowd who came to pay their respects to Supreme Cloud, Lao Mei's heart was grief-stricken, but he still put on a radiant face. His words were like the endless spring rain, and he smiled even before he spoke. It was refreshing. The breeze was gentle, leaving no trace as it passed. Yun Yang, who had turned into a breeze, did not dare to linger and left right away. What a joke. The current situation was definitely a place of trouble. He could not go down. He turned and strolled around the tower to Heaven Inn. As expected, the four noble young masters and more than 30 guards from their families were staying here. Yun Yang could not help chuckling as he looked at them enjoying themselves. Putting himself in their shoes, he could not find fault with the four noble young masters' desertion. Thus, he did not go down but went to the Shangguan family of generals. With his deific consciousness, he realized that not only was Ji Lingxi there, Bai Yixue, Fang Mafei, and Xiao Xiaoqing were there as well. It was normal for Xiao Xiaoqing, who had lifted the ban on alcohol, to hold a wine jar. From time to time he would take out a peanut from his pocket and throw it into his mouth. During this period of time, he was basically in a state of muddle-headedness and satisfaction. This was probably the state of riding the clouds and floating in the air that he had been pursuing for a long time. Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu were drinking tea in the hall of the courtyard, looking very peaceful. Bai Yixue and Fang Mafei sat on the left and right respectively, one high and one low, one sitting on the roof while the other leaned against the yard door. Although they looked lazy, the mystical qi that flowed around both of them was unusually lively. Their current state was enough to ensure the safety of the two ladies should there be any accidents. Even if the world's pinnacle assassins were to attack, they could still buy some time for the ladies. Yun Yang nodded in satisfaction. Yun Yang nodded in satisfaction. Looking at their alertness, he was sure that he had found the right people. As for Xiao Xiaoqing, Yunyang no longer held any hope for him. This matter proved that this guy was just a salted fish from the outside to the inside. Other than drinking, dizziness, and sleeping, he really didn't care about anything else. This fellow, along with the 4 noble young masters, was categorized by Yunyang as a group of people who did not seek to improve themselves. There were also 4 white geese rolling around in the yard like little white pom-poms. Looking at this side, all he could see was peace and happiness. In spite of it, Yunyang could still sense a faint eerie aura hovering above the yard, causing the peace and tranquility in front of him to be tinged with an indistinct gloominess. The aura was both real and illusory. Even with Yunyang's current level of deific consciousness, he still could not quite grasp it. It was even more difficult to find the exact location of the source of the aura. Only the discomfort that he suppressed in his heart was real and unusually tangible. Another piece of evidence that made Yunyang suspicious of the presence of the eerie aura came from Ji Lingxi, who was in the pavilion. Young Lady Ji would look around suspiciously every once in a while, her gaze filled with uncertainty and suspicion. Obviously, Ji Lingxi had also sensed the presence of the aura. However, just like Yunyang, she could not confirm the actual location of the aura. In spite of this, her worried expression had already said too much. This is the surveillance of the deific consciousness of a pinnacle expert of this world? Yunyang thought to himself, for such an expert to perform such surveillance at this time and place, it's obvious that he's looking for me, using the group of people below to lock onto me. In other words, the people below are already in considerable danger. However, under such surveillance, how do I enter? What can we do to resolve the current crisis without alerting the enemy? The other party obviously knew where Yunyang's real weakness was, Ji Lingxi and Shengguan Lingxiu. As long as they could monitor this area, they would be able to wait for Yunyang before long. If there was a need, he could even capture the 2 ladies and force Yunyang to show himself. This was the other danger of Yunyang's identity as Supreme Cloud being exposed. The Supreme Cloud of the past did not have such a weakness to exploit. The light breeze that Yunyang had turned into drifted to and fro leisurely. It was only when he was about to leave that there was an unusual ripple, whether it was intentional or not. Then, the manifestation of the wind dissipated into nothingness, returning to a standstill. The deific consciousness that had an uncertain location shook visibly. In the next moment, countless deific consciousnesses soared into the sky from all directions, locking down the space of dozens of miles above the Shengguan family of generals in an instant, leaving nothing behind. Countless tyrannical forces whizzed about in the sky, wreaking havoc in the air and shattering it. There were even more powerful forces that soared into the sky, sweeping back and forth at a height of about 10,000 feet above the ground. From afar, a few deific consciousnesses rushed over from all directions, forming another layer of encirclement. For a moment, the countless forces shuffled back and forth in the air. The unimaginable spectacle shocked Yunyang. How much force has the 4 Seasons Tower mobilized? Yunyang thought to himself, could it be that the 4 Seasons Tower wants to finish everything in one go? To end my existence once and for all? That's exactly what I intend to do. However, I have to arrange everything first. It was the same pawnshop from the other day. Shui Wuyin reclined lazily in the round-back chair while Yunyang, who was also lounging lazily beside him. Of course, Yunyang had already changed his appearance. How is it? Asked Yunyang. The situation is tense, unprecedentedly tense. Shui Wuyin's face was expressionless, one of his legs crossed as he swayed back and forth. However, there wasn't the slightest bit of leisurely atmosphere in his words. The 4 Seasons Tower has been tracking down the 9 Heavens Dictums members recently. Just in these 4 days alone, 19 of the 9 Heavens Dictums brothers have been lost. Yunyang's heart tightened. How did you deal with it? Shui Wuyin was expressionless. I have to be responsible for the majority of the remaining people. Yunyang's expression darkened. That means it's exactly what you're thinking. Shui Wuyin cut him off. I've protected the families of the 9 Heavens Dictums brothers. There's only one request, or rather, one condition for everyone. If they're caught, the faster they die, the better. Yunyang felt a pang in his heart as he fell silent. Chapter 797. Shui Wuyin was silent as well. Only then did he continue to speak clearly. We can't afford to be careless now. I'm willing to believe in all the 9 Heavens Dictum brothers, that they're not afraid of death, that they're loyal. But the reality is, there are those who can't hold on. That's why 19 of our brothers have died. Shui Wuyin sighed softly. Actually, there were only 7 people who gave themselves away in the beginning, and these 7 people were all from the outermost part of the 9 heavens dictum. Their knowledge was limited. If they could keep it a secret, there wouldn't be any subsequent losses. But they couldn't keep it a secret. Through them, their superiors were found out. The superiors couldn't stand the torture, so they found out about their superiors. That's how it turned into the 19 brothers we've lost now. I've given strict orders since the first batch of superiors were found out. Then I ordered all of them to lie low. That's why we've only lost 19. Shui Wuyin said coldly, if I'd been a step later, I'm afraid I'd be in the Four Seasons Tower's hands now. That's the loss of thousands or even tens of thousands of lives. I don't want to bear this loss. Yun Yang said with a dark expression, you don't have to explain to me. I understand your reason for doing this, it's just that I can't accept it at the moment. If it were me, I'd definitely make the same decision as you. He sighed softly. It's a pity, for the 19 brothers. Shui Wuyin was silent for a long time before he finally spoke slowly, yes. After all, the martial world's methods of torture are much crueler than the public's. There are many people in this world who are unafraid of death, but there are very few who are unyielding. He said coldly, brothers, as long as they didn't seek death immediately, it's expected that they couldn't take it in the end. It's reasonable. I really can't blame them. The 9 heavens dictum's brothers are already the highest I've seen in my life. Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, I understand. Unafraid of death and unyielding have never meant the same thing. Death, everything was over. As a martial world person, most of them could accept death calmly despite being afraid of it. But what was most unbearable was the endless torture that made it hard for people to even live in a situation of life and death. At the end of the day, humans were just flesh and blood. He paused for a moment before continuing, the families of the 19 brothers who have already been sacrificed must be taken good care of. The 9 heavens dictum will be responsible for raising their children until they become talents, and they cannot slack off. Whether they can or can't, we're all brothers of the 9 heavens dictum, it's the same in life and death. Yun Yang said in anguish, it's not shameful to be unable to withstand the Four Seasons Tower's torture. If it were you or me, we might not be able to hold on until the end. Shui Wuyin replied, I understand. I will make arrangements. Then he asked, but what should we do now? How do I continue to move? Now that the situation has reversed, our situation is extremely unfavorable. Yun Yang said, the 9 heavens dictum doesn't need to do anything else. The battle against the Four Seasons Tower is too high a level. Even gathering information is meaningless. So, what I mean is, continue to lie low until this matter is completely over, then we can talk about the follow-up. Shui Wuyin said, it's over? Yun Yang said solemnly, that's right, it is the end. The end means that either I die or the Four Seasons Tower is completely annihilated. To me and Supreme Cloud, the 9 heavens dictum subordinates are no longer a help, but Shui Wuyin kept quiet for a while and said, they are indeed a burden. I've also realized that the 9 heavens dictum's help to you is getting lesser and lesser, almost negligible. They're really only a burden. The competition between high-level cultivators is indeed beyond our power. Yun Yang was even more silent than Shui Wuyin, remaining silent for a long time. After a long time, he sighed deeply and lifted his head to look at the sky, murmuring, it's still possible to be of help to me, but if I were to do so, I'm afraid that among the 9,000 brothers of the 9 heavens dictum, less than 50 will be able to survive. Even including their families, this will be a famine of 50 to 60,000 people. Wuyin, you understand? Shui Wuyin nodded slowly. I understand. That's why I understand you even more. Why you've always been remote, why you've passed the authority to me while you've completely ignored it, almost completely cutting yourself off from the internal workings of the 9 heavens dictum. Yun Yang kept quiet for a while and said, whether it's the 9 Supremes or Supreme Cloud, they can't exist forever. No matter how worthy Supreme Wit is, there will be times when he makes a mistake. Once he makes a mistake, it could be the end of the world. Shui Wuyin chuckled mockingly. Especially when you're still worried about keeping the bow after you've served your purpose. Yun Yang chuckled and said, I won't anymore, because this bow of mine can no longer be kept by anyone. There's only one reason why the 9 Supremes and Supreme Cloud can't exist forever. He said in a low voice, because Yutong is our own country. We can't be the source of chaos, that's all. Shui Wuyin said mockingly, you're quite aware of this. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, are you feeling uncomfortable? Of course I'm feeling uncomfortable. Shui Wuyin said angrily, King threw such a huge burden on me and even acted like you're going to leave at any time. What should I do? I have nowhere to go, and I can't even go with you. Tens of thousands of people are counting on me. How can I be comfortable? You and the Nine Heavens Dictum's people are Yutong's people, but your father is not Yutong's people. What do your own countries and contributions have to do with your father? Your father is willing to help you because of Ji Lingfeng, because of my brother Feng. Do you really think that your father has noble sentiments? You can leave after you've accomplished your mission, but what about the Nine Heavens Dictum's people after you've left? I can't give them official positions on the surface. They're not willing to turn into the martial world's underworld either. There's no way forward or retreat, and you still want me to be happy? Where's your intelligence? Supreme wit? Bullsh *T supreme wit. In the entire Tianxian world, no one other than Shui Wuyin would dare call himself a Bullsh *T supreme wit in front of everyone or behind their backs. It was unprecedented and unparalleled throughout the ages. Yun Yang kept quiet for a bit and said, "The fate of the Nine Heavens Dictum's people is indeed what I want to talk to you about. If you want to continue, I'll completely wash my hands of this. The Nine Heavens Dictum will only be held by you from now on, and will no longer belong to the Nine Supremes. On the other hand, if you don't want to continue, I can be responsible for finding another way out for everyone." Chapter 798. Shui Wuyin was silent once more. "I need to think about it. I shouldn't doubt your trust, but you're gone. It's a foregone conclusion that you'll leave this world. Your trust can be effective for 3 to 5 years, 10 to 20 years, but what about after that?" Yun Yang nodded and gave him a manuscript. "I understand your concerns, and I know that you're sincere towards the people of Nine Heavens. This is what I've promised you before. As long as you cultivate according to this, your physique and all the cultivation problems that might arise can be solved." Shui Wuyin stared at the mystical book in a daze. "All right. Why did you choose to give it to me now? The battle against the Four Seasons Tower is imminent. If I die..." Yun Yang smiled faintly and tossed the mystical book into Shui Wuyin's embrace. Shui Wuyin said, "Actually, there's something I'm curious about. Perhaps I should say that I can't figure it out." Yun Yang said in a relaxed tone, "You want to say why I didn't consider using the School of Kismet State, right?" "Exactly. From what I see, we have too many ways to drive the tiger to devour the wolf, to let the Four Seasons Tower and the School of Kismet State fight each other. They've never been on the same side anyway," Shui Wuyin answered. "It's a pity that the School of Kismet State is formidable and can be called the top hidden sect in the world, but there's still a huge gap compared to the Four Seasons Tower. Compared to the Four Seasons Tower, they're just a slightly larger man-eating ant. Although they can be lethal, they're still ants. Also, although the School of Kismet State is rather capable, it's been too long since they've left the mortal realm. They're too far away. Moreover, they've always been high and mighty, collaborating with the imperial power. Therefore, they're no longer vigilant against the schemes and traps of the mortal realm. Only when they're targeted can they be set up with ease and annihilated. If by any chance the Four Seasons Tower's brains are added to the School of Kismet State, once these two forces join forces, we'll be doomed eternally. Although I know that this might save me some energy, I don't dare to take the risk. For now, not taking risks is the best plan." Yun Yang smiled faintly. "For example, if the Four Seasons Tower had come up with a plan to confer titles as a trap, there would never have been a situation where we succeeded in one strike and the entire sect was annihilated. With such a premise, there was no need to do anything unnecessary to avoid the possibility of additional problems arising." Shui Wuyin nodded slowly. "So that's how it is." "Indeed." Yun Yang took out another spatial ring and passed it to Shui Wuyin. "There's a batch of valuables in here, including gold, silver, jade, and a considerable amount of banknotes. During this period of time when the Nine Heavens Dictum brothers lay dormant and in the future." Shui Wuyin looked at the spatial ring and muttered to himself for a long time before saying with difficulty, "All right." He lifted his head to look at Yun Yang and said, "You've arranged everything so thoroughly now. What is your ultimate goal?" Yun Yang stood up and said softly, "Didn't you all say that I'm supreme wit? I'm used to arranging everything." "Is it only a habit?" Shui Wuyin asked again. However, when he asked the question, Yun Yang was no longer in front of him. Yun Xiaoyao looked at Yun Yang, who was opposite him. In this secret chamber of the imperial palace, he carefully looked up and down at his son. His face was as handsome as ever. It was as if he had returned to the past, the face of a young man that was filled with determination, coldness and calmness, but was also immature. Now, although he was untouched by the hardships, the corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows had changed a lot. Why did you suddenly think of talking to me? Yun Xiaoyao asked in an unusually gentle tone. I want to fight the Four Seasons Tower. Yun Yang said calmly, I'm not too confident about this battle, so I need to make some arrangements beforehand. Yun Xiaoyao turned his head abruptly, his expression changing abruptly. Why are you in such a hurry? Why are you in such a hurry? Yun Yang kept quiet for a moment and said, It's precisely because we don't need to be in a hurry that we're going to fight. Yutang's path has been paved. Unifying Tianxian is only a matter of time. The longer it drags on, the more disadvantageous the situation will be for the Four Seasons Tower. They won't give me more time. Besides, Yutang won't give me too much time either. Although this battle was rushed, it doesn't matter if I'm dead or alive. Everything will calm down. Yun Xiaoyao heaved a long sigh. Yin Yang had made his words very clear. At least he understood everything. It was destined that Supreme Cloud could not participate in this war of unification. Supreme Cloud was already higher than the imperial power, a lofty existence that was like a legend in the mortal world. If he were to contribute more in the war of unification, the balance that was barely maintained now would definitely be broken. The emperor might still be indifferent and could even worship Supreme Cloud like a god, but Yun Yang himself had to be concerned. The imperial court and the people would not be indifferent, neither would Supreme Cloud's enemies. Yutang's enemies would not be indifferent either. Therefore Yun Yang wanted to disappear. And the disappearance of this opportunity, no matter who it was just the right time. Of course, Supreme Cloud was an exception. You said that the situation will become more disadvantageous to the Four Seasons Tower if the stalemate continues. Then let it continue. As long as my royal brother doesn't mind, so what if the others do? Chapter 799. Yun Yang did not retort, argue or explain. He just kept quiet. Yun Xiaoyao paced around angrily and said angrily, You want to go by yourself? That's impossible. At least, I'll go with you. No way. Yun Yang was shocked, immediately breaking his silence to speak. Yun Xiaoyao was going with him? What a joke. Facing the Four Seasons Tower's full force, this was no different from sending himself to die. Someone has to collect your corpse. Yun Xiaoyao glared at him angrily. You don't want to die without a corpse, do you? Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, I won't die. I'm confident. I'm confident as well. Yun Xiaoyao bellowed. Both of them stopped talking, remaining silent for a long time. After a long time Yun Yang said, I'm leaving. Yun Xiaoyao snorted but did not speak. When Yun Yang walked to the window, Yun Xiaoyao's low, raspy voice came from behind him. All these years I've been thinking how great it would be if you were really my son. Why aren't you my biological son? Yun Yang jolted, stunned on the spot. I've truly treated you as my biological son. Yun Xiaoyao's voice was a little weak as he said, I just don't know if there was a moment when you really thought of me as your father. Yun Yang did not speak for a long time. Yun Xiaoyao waited for a long time without a sound, thinking that Yun Yang had left. He sighed softly, his voice bleak. He felt that his state of mind had aged a lot. He murmured, No matter what, don't die. I don't want to collect your corpse. However, the moment he turned around he was immediately stunned. Yun Yang was standing in front of him. He had not left. Yun Yang's eyes were shining. Yun Xiaoyao looked at his nominal son, somewhat at a loss for what to do. Actually, in my heart, you have always been my father. What you've done for me these few years has been more than many biological fathers, more dedicated. Yun Yang's voice was low, but his words were clear and sincere. Yun Xiaoyao's eyes shone brightly. For me, you didn't hesitate to drift outside alone for several years. For me, you didn't hesitate to hide it from the emperor. For me? Yun Yang smiled bitterly. I actually want to be your son for real. But that will only harm you. But in my heart, you will always be my father. You are now, you will always be, and you will always be. Even if I find my biological father in the future, I'll tell him that I already had a father before him. A father who treated me sincerely, loved me, and cared for me. Yun Yang said softly, If I can't find him, I still have you. I'm not destined to be alone in this lifetime. Yun Xiaoyao could only feel a rumbling in his head, his vision blurring. At this moment he only felt that everything he had done before, everything he had sacrificed was all worth it, far more than worth it. It was really worth it. In her haze, she seemed to see Yun Yang kneeling in front of her and kowtowing 3 times respectfully. He wanted to say something, to respond, but he could only feel his lips trembling, unable to speak. Then he watched Yun Yang stand up in a daze and said, I'm leaving. Then he took 2 steps back and his whole body suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yun Xiaoyao trembled, instinctively taking 2 steps back. Suddenly he plopped down on the chair, not making a sound for a long time. Tears fell from his eyes, but a sincere smile hung at the corners of his lips. He could understand every word that Yun Yang said, so he was comforted by it. Happy, excited. In front of outsiders, I can only be your father in name. In front of the emperor, I can only be your adoptive father, a shield that you can use. But only between you and me we are true father and son. Enough, enough. The tower to heaven in. The 4 noble young masters were conflicted. They were now contemplating a very serious life topic. What was their ultimate goal in life? A life of popinjay? A carefree life? To become strong and roam the martial world? To be a high official and rich salary to rule the world? To have beautiful wives and concubines? To have endless luck with women? It was an unusually serious topic. The answers to the above questions were mostly out of reach, only occasionally thought of when they were bored out of their minds. However, this question was suddenly brought before their eyes today at this very moment. The 4 of them were at a loss of what to do, their thoughts unusually chaotic. Yun Yang could not help but sigh inwardly. His original intention was only to ask what the 4 of them planned to do in the future. They had known each other for a while, the 4 of them had called him Big Brother and had even contributed greatly to him in many matters. If it was appropriate, he did not mind leaving some resources for them so that he could meet them again in the bounded universe one day. He had not let down their acquaintance and familiarity during this period of time. However, looking at the 4 men's expressions now, Yun Yang understood a lot more. We don't know what to say at the moment. Dong Qianling broke the silence and said with a bitter chuckle, initially, we had thought of working as hard as we could to follow Boss Yun and make a name for ourselves in this world. We wouldn't have wasted our lives and left a legend behind. Wouldn't that be great? However, we really didn't expect Boss's footsteps to be so big and fast. In the end, the only thing we felt was that we were at a loss and it was hard to imagine. Boss, you're asking us about the future now? We don't know what our future will be like. At least, our original intention is no longer realistic. Dong Qianling was rarely so serious, but this time, he had truly dissected his inner thoughts, his voice heavy. To put it bluntly, we're still popinjays in our bones. We've never lacked wealth and glory since we were born. Conversely, we don't have the ability to enter the imperial court and become officials. For the same reason, we won't have a share in inheriting the family. As for the boundless fortune of wives and concubines, it's still based on our birth. We don't need any effort to obtain them. If it's too easy, it'll be tasteless. As for becoming strong, roaming the martial world, being unrivaled in this world, or even going to another world to reign supreme, we've thought about these ambitions very seriously before. However, we've asked ourselves, we can't bear the hardships. This is also the truth. Dong Qianling chuckled bitterly. We've been pampered since we were young and we've lived comfortably for so many years. Now, it's still possible for us to struggle, but the path of cultivation is long. In the long run, we'll never have that kind of ambition. Chun Wanfeng sighed. It's difficult. Chapter 800. Qiu Yun-san said, during this period of time, we've received plenty of benefits from Boss. Everything else aside, just the fact that we've been able to use all sorts of treasures to elevate our cultivation base in a sacred cultivation ground like the Yun residence has allowed mediocre people like us to elevate to the Dao realm. That's already a great fortune. Looking back at our home, there are no Dao realm cultivators. Not to mention that each of us has gained a high-level mystical beast, increasing our abilities by another level. Now, once we return home, we'll be existences that no one can afford to offend or dare to provoke for the rest of our lives. Even if we don't wish to be in power, we're still existences that can rival the family head. We'll be free for the rest of our lives without any worries. The 4 of them looked at Yun Yang guiltily. We are already very satisfied with our current state. Yun Yang nodded with a smile. I understand and even agree with it. So now all of you should return home. Dong Qianling said, although we don't have the ability to help Boss here, the few of us still want to see Boss defeat the 4 Seasons Tower. Otherwise we won't be able to rest easy. It'll be a lifetime's regret if we miss this battle of the century. There's nothing to see in this final battle. Yun Yang said, if all of you force yourselves to stay, there'll only be a negative outcome. It's not a good thing for you, for us, for everyone. The 4 of them were stunned for a moment before realization dawned on them. Yun Yang was right. If they stayed, Yun Yang would have to worry more. If the 4 Seasons Tower decided to do something to them, Yun Yang would definitely not sit back and watch. Their good intentions would only cause Yin-Yang to be held back by them. Since they were destined to leave, why would they have to wait for an outcome? I wish all of you here, that you don't have to work so hard for the rest of your lives, Yin-Yang said with a warm smile. The four of them had said just now that they would probably be at the end of their rope if they wanted to fight with all their might. Despite the implicit meaning in their words, how could Yin-Yang understand them? If there was a day when their families were destroyed and they were at the end of their rope, when their enemies were too powerful to fight, it would be the time to fight with all their might. That was why Yin-Yang said, I wish all of you that you don't have to work so hard for the rest of your lives. The four of you will always be my Yin-Yang's brothers? Yin-Yang smiled. What I'm most gratified about is that all of you are truly self-aware. Even when you say that you don't know what you want, you've actually gotten what you want the most. You have it in your hands and it won't leave you for even a moment. Fate wills it goodbye. It was as if Yin-Yang's silhouette had melted into the air, gradually disappearing. Go back quickly. As soon as he finished speaking, Yin-Yang's silhouette disappeared completely. Looking at the chair that Yin-Yang had been sitting on, the four of them felt lost, as if they had lost their parents. Even though I said it, I still feel bad about it. I feel like I've let my boss down. Dong Qianling sighed. Qiu Yun-san said dejectedly, Boss is the dragon of the 9 heavens, we're destined to be unable to keep up with him. In this life, to be able to have such an experience is enough to reflect on for 100 years. In the end, there are still traces of us in his legend. Chun Wanfeng chuckled bitterly. Speaking of this, the three of us still have to thank Dong Qianling. If it wasn't for him who managed to establish a relationship with Boss through some mischief, how would we have the chance to be friends with such a living legend? Every night I dream about it, it feels unreal. Especially after Boss' identity as Supreme Cloud was exposed, I'm still in a daze, unable to believe it. Actually, I wanted to follow Boss. Dong Qianling hung his head dejectedly and uttered a shocking statement. It's not just you. The other three chuckled bitterly in unison. Qiu Yun-san said, although you say that you've seen through the ways of the world and are content with what you have, how can a man not have ambitions? Who doesn't want to stand at the pinnacle of the world, to experience the thrill of being lonely at the top? Who doesn't want to stand out and be invincible? Our family isn't too bad, but we're still content with our own corner. Compared to these legendary figures, what are we? However, we still need to have some self-awareness. We can't be too insensible. Chun Wanfeng chuckled self-deprecatingly. Boss is a person who values relationships and loyalty. If we want to follow him, he'll definitely think of ways to fulfill our wishes. However, our speed of advancement, state of mind, and determination are too far behind Boss. If we force ourselves, we'll only be a burden to him. Using us as a hindrance to make Boss slow down as well, that'll be harming Boss. We'll be letting him down. Since Boss is destined to soar through the clouds, why do we have to be a burden? It'll only be a burden to us and ourselves. The four of them looked at each other and chuckled softly. We can't do anything for Boss, but we can let him go into battle with a light burden. By then we can tell our descendants that Tianquan's legend, Supreme Cloud, is your grandfather's brother. It's not necessarily a joy in life. Dong Qianling stood up. There's no time to think about the future now. Pack your things quickly and return to the family. He looked at the other three. After I return, I'll cultivate in seclusion for a period of time before going out to train in the martial world. If I have the chance to go to the bound of universe in this lifetime, I'll try to meet Boss again. If I can't go in the end, then it's fate. The other three agreed. That's right, that's right. That's right. Let's go. The four of them walked out of the room in a single file. A guard was standing by the door, saying, when young Master Yin left just now, he left 4 rings for the 4 young masters. As he spoke, he handed over the 4 rings in his palm. The 4 of them took one each but felt a surge of emotions, not daring to open it. Let's wait until we get home to see. Dong Qianling kept the rings and said, the things Boss left behind must be extraordinary. We mustn't cause trouble for Boss at this time. That's right. Let's go. In the afternoon of the same day, the 4 noble young masters left Tiantang City's south gate quietly with their guards. They walked 500 miles and went in 4 different directions, quickly disappearing into the wilderness. No one noticed that the 4 of them had left. It was at this moment that a line of words formed by white clouds appeared in the sky above Tiantang City. Everyone's attention was drawn to it. Mr. Nian, meet at Tianshan Cliff in 3 days. A line of words floated quietly in the sky. Sometimes it was dark clouds, sometimes it was white clouds, sometimes it was rosy clouds, and sometimes it was golden clouds. The signs of human intervention were obvious. After a while, the cloud character in the horizon gradually became even larger, becoming incomparably large. This type of change was extremely moving, and it had long attracted everyone's attention. The entire capital city was suddenly filled with thunderous cheers that shook the heavens and earth. Supreme Cloud. It's Lord Supreme Cloud. Lord Supreme Cloud is back. In the afternoon when I was writing, I found Lady May's farewell concert and watched it. I was still heartbroken. When I saw her in her wedding gown walking up the stairs and the 2 doors in front of her opened, I clearly felt that that moment didn't belong to this world anymore. After I finished reading, I saw a line in the comments. A netizen asked, "Have you found him in the other world?" Tears streamed down my face. Chapter 801. Countless people rushed out of their homes and looked up at the sky, gazing at the word in the sky, their faces filled with reverence. Although the streets were crowded with countless people, the atmosphere of Tiantang City was unusually quiet. The citizens of Tiantang City were only looking at the sky with sincerity, looking at the traces left behind by the person they respected the most. There was no more clamor. Countless people's eyes were filled with tears, and they were all indescribably touched. This was Supreme Cloud. This was Supreme Cloud. The legend of this world had performed a miracle in front of them. It was truly a miracle. How could the ever-changing word in the sky be accomplished by a human? Many people recalled Supreme Cloud's popinjay behavior when he had restored his identity as Yun Yang. They could not help but feel amused and impressed. Young Master Yun was known to be a money grubber back then, accumulating wealth everywhere. However, it had long been proven by Yutong's officials that Yutong's many years of war had resulted in countless families of martyrs and injured soldiers receiving donations every year and every month. The source of this money was none other than Yun Yang, Supreme Cloud. The Board of War's Marshal Tai Zheng had also come forward to testify that it was not only the military expenses and injured soldiers, even his own wedding had been a gift of silver taels from Supreme Cloud. The Nine Heavens dictum had sent out a secret message. It was a complete name list, a thick stack of it. It was the name list of Supreme Cloud's secret donations over the years, as well as the astronomical amount of silver taels. A rough estimate showed that the number of people who had received Supreme Cloud's aid, directly or indirectly, was almost equal to the entire population of Yutong. What a shocking number. What a sky-high amount of wealth. Supreme Cloud had given it all away without leaving a single penny. Countless people were tearing up, their hearts almost bursting with excitement. This is our Supreme Cloud. Our God of Yutong. Now this God of Yutong had finally shown himself, leaving his words in the sky. Although most people did not understand what it meant, they cheered instinctively. Countless injured soldiers and the widows of martyrs had tears streaming down their cheeks when they saw the word Supreme Cloud had left in the sky. It was gratitude that seeped deep into their bones. Respect for generations to come. Since the beginning of time, there has never been a person who has been revered by the people to such an extent. His Majesty exclaimed, "I have no qualms now, nor do I feel any jealousy. I am only glad that such a character is in Yutong after all." Ever since Supreme Cloud's words appeared, they had been hanging in the sky. It was getting more and more eye-catching. It was obvious to everyone that Lord Supreme Cloud was waiting for a reply. Everyone was waiting quietly. He watched quietly. Countless people covered their mouths with their hands. Tears flowed freely, but they stared unblinkingly at the words in the sky. It was his benefactor's handwriting, the traces of Lord Supreme Cloud. I might not be able to see it more than a few times in my life. This time, even if it's just a few words, I must see it clearly. He had to engrave it in his heart. He would never forget it for all eternity. Countless scholars took out their brushes and ink on the spot. Regardless of where they were, they immediately began to copy. An hour later, a clear voice came from nowhere, echoing throughout the entire Tiantang city. Lord Supreme Cloud, grudges and grudges are destined to never be resolved peacefully, no matter where they are. Since Lord Supreme Cloud has the intention to settle the score, why can't we settle it in Tiantang City? Countless people began to whisper to each other. Who is this person speaking? Who is he? What's his background? What grudge does he have with Lord Supreme Cloud? Does he have the right to do so? Shu, don't you see Mr. Nyen written in the sky? This person must be Mr. Nyen. To be able to draw Lord Supreme Cloud's personal invitation, he must not be an ordinary person. He must have some background. F***ck, how can I not know about this little disagreement? I'm asking what grudge there is? This bastard dares to become enemies with Lord Supreme Cloud? He dares to challenge him right in front of his face. How dare he? How dare he? Well, let's see what happens next. The words in the sky have changed. There's new content. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the words in the sky had turned into the color of dark clouds once again. It was like thick ink that was embedded in the sky, creating a heavy and oppressive atmosphere. Mr. Nian, the Four Seasons Tower is despicable and shameless. You've used all sorts of despicable means to set up layers of ambushes at Tianshan Cliff and cause the death of my 8 elder brothers. I dare not forget this grudge and hatred. Since I want to settle the grudge, of course I have to do it at Tianshan Cliff. The Four Seasons Tower doesn't have the right to fight me in Tiantang City. His words were laced with resentment and a murderous aura that spanned 3,000 miles. There were more than 10 million people in Yutong who read the words, causing a commotion at once. It was as if a super bomb had been dropped in the crowd, shaking the earth and shaking the heavens. It was the Four Seasons Tower's men who killed the 9 Supremes? How dare they? How could they do such a thing? What is the Four Seasons Tower? Who dares to tell me? D*MN the Four Seasons Tower. The F*King Four Seasons Tower should be destroyed. Could this Nian be the Four Seasons Tower's leader? F*CK, he's obviously not a good person. What's wrong with his surname? Serves him right to be beaten into a sticky pulp by Lord Supreme Cloud. There were even people who cried out, Nian, why aren't you dead yet? Get out of Tiantang City. Four Seasons Tower, get out of Tiantang City. Go to hell. One person's cry was answered by 100 people. The 100 people's response was followed by the tens of thousands. In an instant, millions of people were shouting at the same time, Nian, get out of Tiantang City. Four Seasons Tower, get out of Tiantang City. An eye for an eye. All of you from the Four Seasons Tower shall die a horrible death, die without a complete corpse. D*MN the Four Seasons Tower, you deserve to be sliced into pieces and your bones burned to ashes. Bastard Nian, how can you F*King still have the cheek to live in this world? Go to hell quickly and cleanly. Yun Yang's words had undoubtedly announced the real culprit who killed the 9 Supremes to the world. It had also put an end to all the Four Seasons Tower schemes in Yutong. From this moment onwards, the Four Seasons Tower could hardly do anything in Yutong anymore. Unless they were never exposed, they would be like rats crossing the street. As long as Yutong's subjects and people were still alive, the opposition between them would never disappear. As powerful as Supreme Lord Springfrost was back then, there were still a few people who knew about his identity as a member of the Four Seasons Tower. What was more, what the Four Seasons Tower wanted was never imperial power but providence. Providence was something that could never be separated from the people's support. Chapter 802. What the Four Seasons Tower was facing now was disgust, the most extreme form of disgust. This was the most severe and irreversible fate backlash. The Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups would never wish to see such a scene. Faced with such a wave of resistance, the words millions of people and the scolding of the masses, an ordinary person might have already broken down mentally. However, Mr. Nian let out a heavy snort. His snort was like a muffled thunder that shook everyone's hearts. Everyone felt their hearts tremble, and their faces involuntarily turned pale as they staggered. Everyone could not help but have a terrifying thought. Who was this Mr. Nian? How could he be so domineering and terrifying? The final battle will take place at Tianshan Cliff. If you don't go, I won't show myself. You can continue and wait for the next chance for me to show myself. The words in the air were changing. I believe that the Four Seasons Tower doesn't have the ability to capture me. Do I need to show my confidence? I've been going back and forth in Tiantang City a few times this day. Even now, have you discovered where I am? Have you found any trace of me? Right now, I'm right here, but are you able to capture me? So what if you found out my true identity? Would I be so foolish as to come right under your noses and wait for you to attack me? As long as I don't appear, the Four Seasons Tower's plan will never come to fruition. Although the words in the air changed very quickly, it gave off a very leisurely feeling, even very carefree. Mr. Nian's elegant voice rang out again. The Four Seasons Tower's previous targets were good at hiding, but as long as a person's whereabouts were exposed and there was a weakness that could be targeted, they would no longer be invulnerable. There are many people you care about in Tiantang City and the residents of Yun. Do you not care about their lives? The words in the air changed again. Tianshan Cliff still has the blood of 8 of my brothers. What do you say? I'll give you 3 days to set up at Tianshan Cliff, just like the previous time. The words in the air stopped at this line and did not change after that. Mr. Nian said a few more words, threatening and intimidating, but there was no longer any response from the air. An hour later, the dark clouds that were embedded in the horizon slowly dispersed, and there were no longer any traces of ink. As the ink faded from the horizon, the whole of Tiantang City erupted into a frenzy of cursing. On this day, millions of Yutong citizens, both inside and outside of Tiantang City, were cursing the Four Seasons Tower in unison, without exception. The Four Seasons Tower's people were truly unlucky. All the female relatives in the family were greeted by tens of millions of people without exception. And it was a greeting over and over again. Filthy words and all kinds of malicious curses came one after another. The head of the Four Seasons Tower, Mr. Nian, was the target of everyone's attention. No one below the 19th generation of his ancestors was spared. There were no exceptions, no one was lucky enough to be scolded. The veins of the Four Seasons Tower spies were throbbing as they listened. They were filled with indignation but had nowhere to vent it. Revenge? How could he take revenge? Tens of millions of people were scolding you. Who could you seek revenge from? If you killed them one by one, no matter how skilled you were, how could you kill so many heads? The Four Seasons Tower's people had even more terrifying guesses in their hearts. This was only the beginning. When the news spread, there would only be more people scolding them. By then, it could be hundreds of millions or even billions of people scolding them together. After all, the total number of Yutong citizens was considerable. And when that time comes, won't there be people scolding me everywhere and people scolding me everywhere? How can I take revenge then? The Four Seasons Tower's people made the wisest choice at the first instance. All of them withdrew from Tiantang City, away from the clamor. Yes, away from the hustle and bustle, not even daring to stay in the faraway towns, but heading straight for Tianshan Cliff. This was because Yutong's people's vehement curses would continue from now on for a long, long time. Whether it was the officials in charge of relics or the common folk, whether it was in the morning, at noon, or at night, whether they were with others or alone, they scolded the Four Seasons Tower's people as beasts, calling them the Four Seasons Tower's people despicable. They even scolded their families. Even this was not enough to quench their hatred. Countless citizens made suggestions and memorials to the emperor while officials relayed targeted suggestions to the emperor. It would be Lunar New Year's Eve in the future, but the word Nian was too inauspicious. There would be no more Lunar New Year. It would be Lunar New Year instead. Yes, Lunar New Year. Even if it was Lunar New Year, there would be further discussion on how to celebrate it. Even if it was not Lunar New Year, Nian could not be forgiven. For example, Nian could be categorized as a devil, a ferocious ghost, or a disgusting monster. In Yutong's territory, Nian was more despicable than a rat no matter where it was. It was more disgusting than a maggot in a cesspool. It was even more disgusting than a dung beetle. Yes, this abominable, disgusting thing was Nian. From now on, this bastard must not be allowed to enter Tiantang City during Lunar New Year every year. Every family wanted to set off firecrackers to dazzle this disgusting thing, to frighten it and to drive it away. His Majesty readily accepted the advice and immediately summoned the officials from the Board of Rites for a discussion. The matter of celebrating Lunar New Year was decided. From then on, be it 1,000 or 10,000 years, as long as Lunar New Year was celebrated, Nian must be chased away by the entire population. No, it was too cheap to chase it away only once a year. Every major festival, firecrackers would be set off to chase it away once more. Who would set off firecrackers without restraint when there was a joyous occasion? Such a disgusting thing could not be let in during a joyous occasion. It was probably a prophecy. This custom gradually became a tradition in Yutong and even the entire Tianshan in the future, passed down from generation to generation. The Four Seasons Tower's men had been chased away, so Yun Yang was even more unrestrained. He landed in the residence of Shangguan family of generals to see the two ladies. Shangguan Lingxiu and Ji Lingxi were overjoyed to see Yun Yang return, but they could not help but worry. After all, both of them were cultivators and knew very well how terrifying the Four Seasons Tower could be. Are you really going to Tianshan Cliff for the final battle with the Four Seasons Tower? Shangguan Lingxiu looked at Yun Yang anxiously, her beautiful eyes filled with worry. Yun Yang smiled. Of course I have to go, but the initiative is now in my hands. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but be worried. But, this is still too risky, Yun Yang said softly, there's still a great secret that I need to unravel. Instead of saying that this battle is to settle the past grudges, it's more like I'm going to unravel the doubts in my heart. Ji Lingxi walked over slowly and said resolutely, I'll go with you for this battle. The blood feud at Tianshan Cliff belongs to my eldest brother. You're not allowed to stop me. I'm going even if you do. Chapter 803. Jilingxi rolled her eyes and could not help blushing. Anticipation rose in her heart. If I can help him offset the damage by doing this, I'll be more than happy to do so. Shangguan Lingxiu knew about the red glow on Jilingxi, so the words came out of her mouth without hesitation. It was not just Shangguan Lingxiu, even Yun Yang, who had not planned to bring Jilingxi along, was moved by the suggestion and could not help considering the feasibility of it. You've battled with Mr. Nian for the whole day today. Rest and have a good meal first before we talk about the rest. Shangguan Lingxiu went to prepare the meal. Are you really confident? I want to hear the truth. Jilingxi looked at Yun Yang with an indescribable concern. Confidence? Yun Yang said, if it's just me, it's not very high. However, if I have your help, it will multiply. No problem. Just tell me how I can help you. Jilingxi was excited at once. She felt that she had finally been valued after her long and arduous cultivation. There was finally a place for her to put her skills to use. Jilingxi was genuinely happy that Yun Yang could say that he needed her help with this matter. Can I finally do something for him? Can I just stay behind him and be a nobody, never able to show my face? Although Jilingxi's current cultivation base was higher than Yun Yang's, no matter how Jilingxi pretended to be strong and suppressed him with sparring, she was still the weaker party deep down when they were together. She would often become the one being taken care of unknowingly. Even Jilingxi herself could not understand this. I'm very powerful, much more powerful than Yun Yang. Why do I need him to take care of me everywhere? Although Jilingxi was actually very happy about this kind of care. Yun Yang pulled her into the room. He took out 7 pieces of Eastern amethysts and said with a smile, I urgently need you to help me with something important now. That is to absorb all the energy within these in the fastest and safest way possible. What are these? Heaven and earth treasures? Energy crystals? Jilingxi was very curious. I don't know exactly what this thing is for now, but it's a rare good thing. Yun Yang said, you'll cultivate your cultivation method later. I'll assist from the side. When our mystical qi is fused to its fullest potential, we'll converge the 2 flows of inner energy to circulate in one cycle to increase our cultivation base to the maximum. We must improve our abilities further in these 2 days of buffer time. Then let's go. Without hesitation, Yun Yang set up a simple illusory formation and arranged the 7 pieces of Eastern amethysts into the shape of the Big Dipper in the middle of the formation. Then he ran a golden thread through it and placed the other end of the golden thread on his palm. This formed a small spirit-gathering formation which was connected by the golden thread. As long as it was activated by Shen Qi, it would be an excellent channel for the output of spirit Qi. Come. The 2 of them sat cross-legged facing each other, separated by the purple crystal. Yun Yang grabbed the golden thread with one hand and pressed Jilingxi's palm with the other. He said in a low voice, focus on cultivating the cultivation method you're cultivating. Use the mystical yin energy to stimulate the purple crystal's spiritual qi. Don't slack off, give it your all. Jilingxi did as she was told, slowly channeling her mystical qi. The moment her mystical qi came into contact with the purple crystal's spiritual qi evaporated with a soft hum. Almost at the same time, Yun Yang's endless divine arts mystical qi was activated as well. Using the golden thread as a medium, he guided the swirling purple crystal's spiritual qi into his meridians. It swiftly circulated through his meridians, limbs, and bones before it slowly flowed into Jilingxi's palm from his right palm. Jilingxi could only feel an unstoppable, dense, and boundless spiritual energy surging into her palm. Her meridians expanded abruptly as the abundant spiritual energy was quickly converted into a sea of spiritual qi that surged into her meridians like a great river. In the blink of an eye, the spiritual qi in her body was almost full. Jilingxi's mind worked quickly, accelerating the cultivation method that she was already cultivating at full speed. She directed the surging energy into her dantian and turned it into her own use, while the other passed through her left hand and redirected it to the next cycle. Yun Yang was doing the same thing as well. The 7 Eastern amethysts glowed brilliantly at the same time. While Jilingxi was shocked by the immense power of the 7 purple crystals, she was even more perplexed than before. Her cultivation method was no longer the Ji family's cultivation method that she had cultivated when she was born in the Ji family. It was a mystical cultivation method that she had inherited from her unreliable father. Not only was it powerful, its level was far above all the cultivation methods in this world. Even with Yun Yang's secret identity as Supreme Cloud, the cultivation method that he cultivated should still be within the realm of this world. It was impossible for it to be mentioned in the same breath as hers. However, the reality was that when her cultivation method and Yun Yang's cultivation method formed a huge cycle, there was not the slightest bit of disharmony. In fact, it was indescribably compatible. The speed at which they cultivated and absorbed spiritual qi had more than doubled out of nowhere. It was a remarkable sight indeed. As the spiritual qi continued to roar in their meridians, the rate of increase grew faster and faster. It was fast and steady without any hint of disorder. It had only been an hour since the cultivation method had been cultivated, but the spiritual qi in her dantian was already close to saturation. She had to further compress it or else it would be futile. Then, how did Yun Yang know that their cultivation methods could be operated in such a manner, complementing each other so seamlessly? She remembered that she had never told him about the characteristics of her cultivation method. This was just too incomprehensible and even more difficult to believe. Spiritual qi washed over their bodies over and over again. Both of them felt that their strength was increasing bit by bit without any tricks. Gradually, the two of them entered into a state of cultivation where they forgot about everything else in themselves. Their hearts were free from distractions as they focused solely on improving themselves. Shengguan Lingxiu came to the door quietly but could only see the roaring spiritual qi in the room. She could not see the silhouettes of both of them. Although she was shocked by the commotion of their cultivation, she knew that she could not disturb them. She stared at them in a daze for a while before she finally sighed and quietly moved a chair to sit outside the door. She stared at the scenery outside, lost in thought. After a long time, Shengguan Lingxiu suddenly channeled all of her cultivation base into her fingers. She gripped the hilt of her sword and squeezed it hard. Releasing her grip, she looked at the faint handprint on the hilt and felt the pain in her fingers. She could not help but recall how Ji Lingxi had twisted the same sword in her hand into a dough twist without a sound a few days ago. Then, with a casual pinch of her fingers, the twisted sword turned into a pile of metal shards instantly. The difference is too great. The difference is too great. How can the difference be so great? Chapter 804. Shengguan Lingxiu mumbled to herself. What's the use even if we force ourselves to be together? To be a vase protected by him for the rest of my life? Even if he doesn't mind and I'm willing to give in, would that still be me, Shengguan Lingxiu? At the door, old Mistress Shengguan held her dragon-headed walking stick, her eyes filled with deep pity. She could not help but recall something. King Yun, your Yun Yang isn't young anymore. When this old one's son was his age, he was already the father of 2 children. As a father, why aren't you considering his marriage? Yun Yang is stubborn. I've never forced him, including marriage. What do you think of my Lingxiu, King Yun? It's rare that the two of them are in love. Isn't it a wonderful thing for our families to be in-laws? Marshal Chiu mentioned to this old one that he's willing to be the matchmaker. Old mistress, regarding Yun Yang, rather than saying that I've never forced him, it's more accurate to say that he's never bothered me. Everything about this child. I can't make decisions for him. Especially marriage, it has to depend on his own opinion. Looks like the Cloud King is not optimistic about this marriage. No. I'm happy to see it happen, even willing to facilitate it with all my might. However, Yun Yang still has to make the final decision himself. Marriage is the order of parents and the words of the matchmaker. This old one understands King Yun's intentions. I'll take my leave now. Old mistress, no need to send me off. The old mistress recalled the last time she came to Yun Xiaoyao to propose marriage. She had thought that if she were to disregard her own dignity and come forward, Yun Duanduan would not be able to reject her. He would definitely agree to it immediately and happily. What she did not expect was that Yun Xiaoyao's reaction was like this. Despite all his good words, it did not work out in the end. Old Mistress Shengguan left in a huff and viewed Yun Xiaoyao as an enemy from then on. Only now did she know. There was not a single lie in what Yun Xiaoyao had said at that time. It was true that he was happy to see the marriage happen and was willing to facilitate it, but it was even more true that he could not make the decision for Yun Yang. Supreme Cloud of the 9 Supremes. Supreme Cloud who dominated the world and the martial world. How could Yun Xiaoyao make the decision for Supreme Cloud? Especially marriage, such an important matter of one's life. Even His Majesty would not dare to make decisions for Supreme Cloud. Ever since she knew that Yun Yang was Supreme Cloud, old Mistress Shengguan's wisdom and experience allowed her to immediately guess that Yun Yang was not Yun Xiaoyao's biological son. Recalling Yun Xiaoyao's helpless expression, old Mistress Shengguan sighed. So, I have wronged Yun Xiaoyao at that time. My selfishness has gotten the better of me, old Mistress Shengguan murmured to herself. Now that Lingxiu and Yunyang were together, it seemed that Lingxiu had fallen behind quite a bit. It was not in terms of family background, appearance, or temperament, it was only in terms of cultivation ability. However, the cultivation of strength was something that could not be achieved in a short period of time. Old Mistress Shangguan closed her eyes and sighed, mumbling, "It's time to let Lingxiu seek her own happiness. The Shangguan family of generals has really held her back for far too long." "Lingxiu," old Mistress Shangguan called out softly. Shangguan Lingxiu lifted her head as if she had just woken up from a dream. She had been lost in her thoughts just now and did not realize that the old mistress was already in front of her. "Old Granny, what are you thinking about?" "Nothing." Shangguan Lingxiu smiled, looking as if she was doing very well. "It's good that you're fine. I just remembered that there's something important to do." "Come with me," old Mistress Shangguan said. She turned to leave as soon as she finished speaking. Shangguan Lingxiu looked back worriedly and glanced at Fang Mafei and Bai Yixue who were standing guard on both sides. Only then did she follow old Mistress Shangguan, turning back repeatedly with every step. Shangguan Ancestral Hall. "Old Granny, why did you bring me here?" Shangguan Lingxiu asked in surprise, looking at the ancestral tablets. What important matter could there be here that was so urgent and urgent? "We, the Shangguan family, have a very special secret," old Mistress Shangguan said in a low voice. This originated from the first ancestor of the Shangguan family. Back then, the first ancestor came across a heavily injured person who was on the verge of death. The first ancestor tried his best to save the person, but the person disappeared without a word of thanks after he recovered. The first ancestor's intention was to save the person, so he didn't mind if there was a word of thanks. However, a year later, another person came looking for him, saying to thank him for saving his life and that he could fulfill one of his wishes, even saying that it could be anything. However, the first ancestor's main purpose in life was to help those in danger. He really didn't have the intention to repay his kindness, so he rejected it directly. However, that person insisted on leaving 3 joss sticks, saying that if he had any requests in the future, he only needed to light the 3 joss sticks and someone would come to help. He also said that anything would be fine. If that was all, I'm afraid first ancestor wouldn't have placed this matter in his heart and forgotten about the 3 incense sticks. However, after that person handed over the 3 incense sticks, he waved his hand and moved the ancestral grave of Shangguan family. He said solemnly that from then on, the descendants of Shangguan family would all be invincible generals who won hundreds of battles and would be nobles for generations to come. Shangguan Lingxiu's scalp was already numb from the shock of the story when she heard this. Who was that person? How could he have such a remarkable ability? With a wave of his hand, he could move the ancestral graves and change the feng shui. It was already impressive to be able to be a nobleman for generations, yet he could even decide that the Shangguan family of generals would be passed down. It was a remarkable technique. What was more, a wish could be anything. This statement was a little too exaggerated. Only a legend could have such ability. After the person said this, he disappeared in front of the first ancestor. Only then did first ancestor come to a realization. He knew that he had met an unparalleled expert, so he naturally passed down the 3 sticks of incense from generation to generation. He even passed down the teachings of his ancestors. If the later generations have exceptional talents, they can rely on these 3 sticks of incense to achieve an unparalleled immortal fate. I don't know if it was a prophecy or the fate of the feng shui, but the Shangguan family has been a family of generals since then, being nobles for generations to come. It's really like what that person said. However, because this secret is too important, the 3 joss sticks have been passed down and have never been used until today. Old Mistress Shangguan looked at Shangguan Lingxiu. "Looking at you, I was suddenly enlightened. Can't these 3 joss sticks help you achieve your wish? Although your wish is difficult to achieve, it's still within the scope of anything." Shangguan Lingxiu was stunned. "Achieve my wish? How should I put it? Deny it? How many people in the Shangguan family did not know of my wish?" Chapter 805. Young Lady Lingxiu could not help blushing. She said bashfully, "I didn't know there was such an anecdote, but it sounds really mysterious and hard to imagine. It's been more than a dozen generations since the rise of the Shangguan family in Yutong. Could it all originate from, your thinking is still too simple and naive?" Old Mistress Shangguan sneered. "The first ancestor I mentioned is the first-generation ancestor who established the Shangguan family of generals. Now, strictly speaking, you should be the 172nd descendant of the Shangguan family of generals. Your nephew, on the other hand, is the 173rd generation. Other than being a taboo and a cover, The so-called genealogy now only records the dozen or so generations of the family of generals since Yutong. 173 generations. Shengguan Lingxiu was dizzy from the number, unable to think straight. How long had it been since more than 100, almost 200 generations of heritage? Even if each generation only lasted for 30 years, would it not be more than 5,000 years, almost 6,000 years? Do you know why the Shengguan family of generals is revered by the world's warriors? The night sky is filled with stars. The Big Dipper is revered by the world's warriors. This saying doesn't only exist in Yutong's era. Previously De Shang, De Zhou, De Zhao, De Qin. Throughout the rise and fall of countless empires, the people of the Shengguan family were all great generals of the country. It's just that as the dynasties rose and fell, the Shengguan family would lie dormant for a period of time. However, as long as the people of the Shengguan family appeared on the battlefield, they had never lost an inch of land. Being undefeatable and undefeatable is definitely not a legend that only appeared in the recent centuries. Among the 170-odd generations of the Shengguan family of generals, there are more than 400 imperial marshals. As for the generals, there are more than 1,000 of them. How can the Shengguan family of generals' heritage be as little as what you see? Old Mistress Shengguan's voice was bleak, but it was laced with an indescribable sense of pride. Shengguan Lingxiu was rendered speechless by the series of new understandings. Alright, let's get back to the topic at hand. Old Mistress Shengguan said, I'm going to light these 3 incense sticks now. If you're unwilling, say it now. Why wouldn't I be? Shengguan Lingxiu was surprised. Because this opportunity is not ordinary. Once the incense is lit, it will not be extinguished. With the arrival of the immortals, your fate will change accordingly. In the future, perhaps you'll find that what you've been pursuing, what you've been chasing, has long been unable to catch up to you. At that time, perhaps there will be a new change in your heart. Old Mistress Shengguan looked at Shengguan Lingxiu lovingly. Therefore, I'm giving you the right to choose your own destiny. Shengguan Lingxiu said. Shengguan Shengguan bit her. What if I can't? Wouldn't it be a waste of this unparalleled immortal fate? Said, Master, Mistress said, I doesn't matter about. I master, to in fact, Ivy wanted to light these 3 incense sticks since the first day Ivy received them. I think Ivy been patient enough to hold it in until now. Sai, the burden of the Shengguan family has been on your shoulders for so many years. Now, thanks to you, Supreme Cloud has resolved the predicament and Zos vengeance is about to be avenged. The family owes you too much. I don't think it's enough to compensate you with this. Shengguan Lingxiu said softly, I wish to know the cause and effect of the incident, everything. Old Mistress Shengguan was silent for a moment before saying, Come with me. There was a small door hidden in the corner of the ancestral hall where the Shengguan family of generals worshipped their ancestors. Shengguan Lingxiu had never seen it open before. Today, however, the door was opened before her. Shengguan Lingxiu would never have dreamt that such a small door could actually seal such a huge space. It was a huge space that could almost be called a warehouse. The old mistress walked over with her back straight, her eyes looking straight ahead as she said in a low voice, Here are all the biographies of our ancestors, as well as the weapons they used, the tools they cherished. Shengguan Lingxiu looked at everything before her like she was on a pilgrimage, her eyes welling up with tears. As she walked through the large warehouse, she felt as if countless gazes were looking at her with calm and kind gazes. They were the gazes of the ancestors. A table came into view when she reached the end. There was only a jade box on it. The old woman opened the jade box and picked up a book. Underneath the book there was another small jade box. The old mistress opened the book and flipped to the back, stopping when she reached a certain page. There were a few lines of scribbled words. One day, on the way back to the army, there was a martial world feud. A plump man barged into the army in a panic. He was severely injured and unconscious, barely breathing. Feeling pity for him, I hid him and treated him. I later found out that his surname was Tang. His name was Tang Yifeng. 7 days later, his injuries healed and he left after bidding farewell. After the new year, a lady came and said that she would fulfill a request of the Shengguan family, anything. She thought of it and recorded it solemnly. The words were clear. The matter had not been taken to heart at the time. It was only because someone had come to repay a debt of gratitude and because she knew that the person was not to be trifled with, that she recalled it and recorded it. The heavenly incense in the jade box can help the descendants of the Shengguan family to attain immortality. Remember this, future generations. The rest was exactly as old Mistress Shangguan had said. So it is. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but be curious. Just what kind of person could possess such an unparalleled power? How dare he boast that any wish could be fulfilled no matter what it was? Since you have no objections, I'll bring out these 3 incense sticks now. Old Madame Shangguan did things swiftly and decisively. She immediately took out the long jade box. The 3 incense sticks were sparkling and translucent like jade. They looked almost transparent. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the incense was slender and only the length of a palm. It was small and cute. Its appearance alone made it stand out from ordinary incense. Old Mistress Shangguan took out a small incense burner and inserted the 3 incense sticks into it devoutly before lighting them up one by one carefully. In an instant, green smoke rose into the air. The grandfather and grandson duo were astonished to find that the green smoke was rising in a straight line, as straight as an iron wire. It spread all the way up and the roof above them couldn't stop it at all. The green smoke pierced a hole through the roof. The 3 incense sticks that had been stored for thousands of years could actually pierce through the roof just by burning the smoke. The current situation was unimaginable and unbelievable. Chapter 806. The smoke rose straight up. Although it was still thin, it rose higher and higher. Within a breath's time, it had reached the sky, pierced through the clouds and rose into the 9 heavens. What everyone did not know, what was even more unimaginable, was that after the smoke pierced through the clouds, the hidden fragrance in it began to spread. In an instant, an extremely rich fragrance suddenly spread out in the 9 heavens. It spread out in all directions. On a blue planet, next to a bright and beautiful lake, a white-clothed young man was fishing with a fishing rod. He vowed solemnly, "Look, I'm going to catch a dragon for you in this lake today without any extra tricks." Beside him, there were 7 or 8 extremely beautiful young girls. They were all leisurely minding their own business. Some were reading on deck chairs, some were resting on hammocks, some were playing barefoot by the water, and some were studying music with a flute. Only a young girl in white was smiling and sitting beside the young man in white. Another young girl rolled her eyes and said, "How can there be a dragon in such a small lake? Not to mention this lake, there are no dragons in the entire continent. Let's see how you're going to catch one. How you're going to bluff." "Bluff? Why do you think I'm bluffing? What if I really catch one? Shall we?" The young man in white said, "Do you want to make a bet?" The young girl was very confident. "How are you going to catch something that doesn't even exist?" "All right, let's make a bet. If you catch a dragon, we'll do whatever you say." The young man laughed evilly. How about this, if you lose, you'll practice the 36 diagrams with me. How about that?" As soon as he said this, the few young girls beside him instantly blushed and pouted coquettishly. The first young girl was so embarrassed that her face almost bled. She stomped her feet and said, "You lecher. Let's make a bet. I've already checked this entire planet and there are no traces of dragons. If you lose, I'll punish you, not to touch me for 3 years. No, that's too easy on you. I'll punish you by barking like a dog 3 times. She wanted to say that she was not allowed to touch him for 3 years, but after thinking about it, she changed her mind. Her face turned even redder. Seeing the adorable young girl's expression, the surrounding young girls all burst into laughter. The youth in white was still full of confidence and said, "Good. It's a deal. Let's set the wager like that. Remember, if you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose." "I've taken the bait. Let's see what it is." The girls all turned their heads and focused their attention on the surface of the water. Sure enough, they saw a big fish swimming underwater while pulling the fishing line. For the time being, he couldn't tell what kind of fish it was or what else it was. The girls urged, "Quick, come out of the water and take a look, the stakes are revealed, the stakes are revealed." The hooked object was getting closer and closer to the surface of the water, and everyone could finally see it clearly. It turned out to be a big golden carp. Even though this fish wasn't small in size and was covered in golden scales, it was still not a dragon. This was something that everyone could see with their own eyes. The girl immediately became high-spirited and laughed loudly. "This is clearly a carp, you've lost. Ha! Hurry up and bark like a dog." The youth said, "How is this a carp? Take a closer look." The girl turned her head in disbelief and heard the youth shout, "Carp leaping over the dragon gate, transform." With this shout, the carp on the hook actually transformed into a dragon in an instant. It was still golden in color, and it had 5 claws and 2 horns swimming back and forth in the water. If it wasn't a golden dragon, what could it be? The girl was instantly exasperated. "You cheated? Using such a method to cheat, aren't you ashamed? Shameless." The youth said proudly, "In any case you've lost. What I've hooked is really a dragon." Besides, the legend of the carp leaping over the dragon gate, the fish-dragon transformation, this carp obtained an opportunity and transcended into a dragon. How is this cheating and shameless? The current situation is that the carp has leaped over something similar to the dragon gate. Do you understand? If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. The result of this matter is already a foregone conclusion. Little girl, remember to wash yourself clean later and wait for me to complete the bet tonight, he he he. The girl's face was flushed and she stomped her feet in protest. All the girls laughed and scolded together. In an instant it was extremely lively and noisy. At this moment, a faint fragrance wafted over. The graceful, beautiful, and peerless woman in white who had been sitting beside the youth frowned and calculated with her fingers. She smiled and said, My disciple is coming. I wonder if it's a coincidence or not." The youth in white asked curiously, "Your disciple? When did you obtain this opportunity?" The woman in white snorted and said, "Is the source of this opportunity still you? Back then you asked me to save the direct descendant of the fatty. When I got there, I found that the kid had already been saved. However, the little fatty was so anxious to escape that he didn't repay the favor. So, I made a promise of 3 incense sticks, waiting for fate." The white-clothed youth scratched his head and thought for a while before saying, "So that's what happened. Oh, I remember now. That fatty isn't a human, he's as lazy as a pig. He didn't save his own offspring and instead turned around to trouble me. How could he be compared to that old opponent of mine? Justice is so straightforward. I remember now, I remember everything now. I haven't found trouble with him yet. If that's the case, you should go quickly." The youth in white said, "It's good that you're leaving tonight." He laughed evilly and thought, "No one will be able to control me if you leave. I can do whatever I want with that little girl tonight. Do you think it's that easy to get rid of my gambling debt? Do you think you're old black? Sister May, I'll go with you. I'll help you." The girl who lost the bet begged pitifully. "Help? What's there to help? It's only proper to admit defeat." The youth in white grabbed her in his arms and said to the woman in white, go quickly, come back quickly." The woman in white smiled warmly and said, "Xiaoyi, I'll come back quickly. I'll come back to save you soon." Her body swayed and disappeared without a trace. "You're all bullying me?" The girl called Xiaoyi stomped her feet and shouted. She was full of anger and bitterness. She turned her eyes and looked at the others. "Sister, where are they? Where did they go?" The 7 or 8 girls who were here just a moment ago had disappeared without anyone noticing. "None of you have any sense of loyalty." The girl stomped her feet. The youth laughed. "I say this is clearly an opportunity created for you by the sisters. You have to seize it." As he spoke, he suddenly froze and said, "Oh no. I forgot to tell them something." He tilted his head and murmured, "Forget it. It's not too late to take back the bet first." He picked up the girl and carried her on his shoulder. Ignoring the girl's violent struggles, he sang and walked away in high spirits. "Come on, have fun. We have a lot of time anyway." Chapter 807. Shengguan Lingxiu and old Mistress Shengguan's expressions grew increasingly anxious. Watching the 3 joss sticks burn quietly, the grandmother and granddaughter thought in unison, "The 3 joss sticks are burning calmly, elegantly, proudly, and untainted by the world." However, no matter how elegantly the joss sticks burned, the 2 people who were waiting were still in turmoil. Old Mistress Shengguan could not help but grow anxious as the 3 joss sticks burned to the bottom, but there was still no movement. What's going on? Why isn't there any reaction? The old mistress stared anxiously at the smoke in front of her, mumbling almost unconsciously, could it be fake? Once she thought of the possibility, she could no longer remain calm. The old mistress shuddered uncontrollably as she shivered uncontrollably. This was the Shengguan family's last trump card and its biggest secret. It was also the Shengguan family of general's spiritual pillar that had supported them through countless difficult years. If this incense was fake and it didn't exist, then wouldn't the Shengguan clan's several thousand years of careful protection of this incense become a huge joke? Old Mistress Shengguan knew that she would never be able to accept such an outcome. Shengguan Lingxiu, on the other hand, was more composed. "Old Mistress, don't be anxious. I believe this joss stick communication needs time as well." "What do you mean by that?" The old mistress murmured like she was grasping at a life-saving straw. "Since the joss sticks need to be lit and there's a burning process, does that mean that the immortal needs some time to receive the message? In my opinion, since that immortal is so powerful, he is most likely a powerful existence that does not belong to our continent. No matter how miraculous the incense is, it is still a communication from this world to another world. It will definitely take a certain amount of time. Also, even if that immortal immediately set off after receiving the news, he will still need a certain amount of time to cross the distance between the two worlds. Since there are so many imaginable processes in between, how could he really rush over in such a short period of time? No matter how powerful the immortal is, it would be difficult for him to do so. Shengguan Lingxiu guessed, I'm guessing that being able to rush over in a day or two is already shocking enough. Asking for more would be asking for trouble. You're right. I'm too conflicted and my heart is unbalanced, old Mistress Shengguan mused, feeling her anxious emotions slowly calming down. Shengguan Lingxiu's analysis was obviously reasonable. It was a reality that could be seen through common sense, and it was an undeniable fact. Both of them calmed down once more and waited patiently for the unknown opportunity to arrive. It was at this moment that the grandfather and grandson heard a light laugh at the same time. It seemed to come from beyond the heavens. It seemed illusory, but at the same time, it seemed real and not fake. Just as the two of them were wondering if it was real or not, they saw the cigarette in front of them suddenly change. In a trance, a beautiful figure quietly appeared from the smoke. A lady dressed in white as pretty as a painting, stood in front of them with a faint smile on her face. Old Mistress Shengguan had boasted that she was a rare beauty when she was young, while Shengguan Lingxiu was in her prime, the most beautiful age of her life. However, at this moment, the grandfather-granddaughter pair were both stunned the instant the peerless beauty entered their eyes. A self-deprecating thought rose in their minds at the same time, I can't believe there's such a beautiful woman in this world. I'm nothing compared to her. The lady in white before them could be described as peerless, beautiful, and devastatingly beautiful, but it was still far from enough. Using such words alone would be a blasphemy against the beauty before them. Such beauty did not belong to the mortal world at all. Even in the heavens, among the otherworldly immortals, she should be at the top of the list. She was indescribably beautiful. Just the transcendent charm of rolling her eyes, just the peerless elegance of a slight smile, just the graceful grace of a gentle standing was enough to make everyone in the world fall for her, even if they were to die 9 times without regret. The little girl's mind is very meticulous. The lady in white smiled gently and said, Old mistress, is this the one the Shengguan family has chosen after so many years? Is your wish to make this girl a success? Old mistress replied respectfully, Immortal, please understand. The lady in white was all smiles as she looked at Shengguan Lingxiu from head to toe. She nodded and praised, not bad at all. In terms of temperament alone, you are the best of the best. Very much to my liking. She turned to look at old mistress and asked with a smile, May I ask old mistress a question? Please ask, Immortal, replied old mistress. The lady in white said faintly, From what I know, the opportunity to make a descendant is usually given to boys in this world. Old mistress, however, has chosen your granddaughter. May I ask why? The lady in white asked casually. However, old mistress dared not answer casually. Heaven's will had always been difficult to question. Since this lady was an immortal, she would have her reasons for every question she asked. Perhaps there was a deeper meaning behind it, perhaps it was another test? Even though she looked friendly and amiable, the aura of immortality that lingered around her, the unparalleled beauty that one dared not look directly at, and the indescribably powerful aura, all of it made one feel that she was incomparably noble and unapproachable. Old Mistress Shengguan pondered for a moment and said, To be honest, Immortal, I have my considerations for doing this. Firstly, this girl has sacrificed too much for the family. The family owes her too much, thus delaying her marriage. Now that she's finally found someone she likes, it's hard for her to achieve anything in martial arts because of the family's delay. She's also a prideful person, so she's not willing to be a burden to that person. The lady in white said noncommittally, This can be considered a reason. You mentioned the first reason just now, so there must be a second reason? Yes, answered old Mistress Shengguan. The second reason is, this old one's decision is also for the future of the Shengguan family. She kept quiet for a moment and said, While boys are meant to carry on the family line and represent the family's direct line of descent, the boys of the Shengguan family have never been overly obsessed with martial arts. Instead, they're more interested in fighting and killing. That's why the boys of the Shengguan family of generals are fated to be unable to go far on the path of martial arts. Even if a boy with exceptional aptitude and a great sense of responsibility for the future of the family of generals goes to the immortal sect and is nurtured, The boys of the Shangguan family are born to be brave and ruthless. It's a natural habit and there's no exception. Think about the mortal world, the conflicts between people in the martial world are already chaotic. What's more when it comes to the path of immortality that goes against the natural order? The risk of dying along the way is too great. Chapter 808. If the child were to fall, it would mean that the Shangguan family would lose its greatest hope for nothing. On the other hand, no matter how strong a girl is, compared to a man, even if she has a weak side. Furthermore, a girl knows how to protect herself better. Also, a girl would be less ambitious than a boy. She would not forget her roots and would take care of her family more meticulously. With an immortal to serve as a deterrence from afar, I believe that the Shangguan family would not decline for thousands of years. This is the long-term plan. Old Mistress Shangguan hesitated as she spoke, feeling that all her thoughts could not be hidden from this immortal. It would not be good to hide anything. Finally, in one breath, he said all the words that were hidden in the deepest part of his mind. There's one more thing. With Lingxiu's pure heart and graceful appearance, if she can establish herself in the immortal Tao, the husband she finds in the future will definitely be an outstanding talent of his generation. If that's the case, the Shangguan family would only be sending one away, but there's a high chance that we would gain 2 or even more guardians. This is where my greatest selfishness lies. Old Mistress smiled. This way, while fulfilling Lingxiu's own wish, we can also secure a prosperous future for the family. I think it's not a loss no matter what. The lady in white smiled warmly and said, Old Mistress, your words speak of sincerity. Old Mistress chuckled humorlessly. How would I dare to hide anything from you? The lady in white smiled and looked at Shangguan Lingxiu. Your name is Shangguan Lingxiu? Yes, Shangguan Lingxiu answered with a lowered brow. Born in the year of Bingzi, I'm 23 years old this year. The lady in white said, what's rarer is the phoenix physique. Her meridians are unobstructed, and she has the quality of heavenly yin. Her body is perfect. Although her chakras are limited by this world and do not close themselves, it's only a temporary flaw that can be easily resolved. It's only a matter of course for her to progress 1,000 miles in the future. Not bad indeed. Old Mistress Shangguan and Old Mistress Shangguan were overwhelmed with shock. They had just met, and Old Mistress had not told her anything about Shangguan Lingxiu, but she was able to recite all of it as if she was familiar with it. There was not a single mistake in it. Are you willing to come with me? To be my disciple? The lady in white asked with a smile. Lingxiu is willing. The woman in white smiled and said, is there anything unfinished business before you leave? Shangguan Lingxiu blushed, her eyes reddening as well as she said, could you, immortal, please give me some time? The woman in white said indifferently, I can only give you 4 hours at most. Shangguan Lingxiu was at a loss when she heard that, not knowing how to react for a moment. The woman in white said, I'm not being unreasonable. Firstly, this world's level is low, and it's hard for you to bear my ultimate heaven's power. 4 hours is already the limit. Secondly, since you've vowed to step on this heaven-defying path, then you have to learn to get used to everything from now on. The so-called pinnacle of martial arts has always been too high, too cold, and too lonely. Even if it's high, it's cold at the top. The lady in white sighed and took a good look at Shangguan Lingxiu, saying, although your destiny is extremely good, it is destined that you will not be able to participate in more of this world's turmoil. Shangguan Lingxiu sighed softly and said, this disciple understands? What do you understand? The lady in white asked. Shangguan Lingxiu said sorrowfully, once I start cultivating, time flies, the road is long, the stars are separated, I'm afraid. Immortals and mortals are different, it has always been so. The lady in white said. The old mistress said softly, I'll leave Lingxiu to you in the future. I'm old, I'm afraid I won't be able to wait for her return, everything will. Her voice choked as she spoke. The lady in white said softly, don't worry old mistress. I'll take good care of Lingxiu once she's my disciple. As long as she cultivates diligently, I can guarantee that her life will be smooth and her wishes will come true. No one will dare provoke her in the entire universe. It's only a matter of time before no one dares to bully her as she roams the universe. She smiled proudly. Even the 10 brothers who roam the universe without a care in the world will have to think twice if they want to bully my disciple. Most of them will give up after they've thought it through. His words were truly domineering. It was a pity that old Mistress Shangguan and Shangguan Lingxiu had no idea who the 10 brothers who roamed the universe without a care in the world were. Naturally, they were not in awe of them. They were more shocked by the so-called ultimate heaven's force. Tianshan continent could not even resist it for more than 4 hours. What kind of level of power was that? However, Shangguan Lingxiu's new master was so boastful that old Mistress Shangguan's heart was finally at ease. It seemed that her granddaughter's immortal master was quite impressive. The ultimate heaven's force sounded grand and impressive. Let's call her that for now. We'll go through the apprenticeship ceremony when we return. The lady in white smiled gently. Lingxiu is the first disciple I've taken in my life, and I'm afraid she'll be the only one. This ceremony can't be small, and the gifts that should be received won't be little either. We'll have to plunder them when the time comes. Old Mistress Shangguan felt even more assured when she heard that. As the saying went, a small clue would reveal a big picture. This beautiful immortal had high hopes for Shangguan Lingxiu. She had yet to officially take her in as a disciple, but she could already start planning for her future disciple. Honestly speaking, I have no intention of taking in a disciple at all. Who would have thought that I'd be able to take advantage of Fatty Tang in the end? This is the will of the heavens. The lady in white smiled faintly. 4 hours it is. Quickly go and do what you need to do. Don't mind me. I need to calm down and suppress my power. This realm is too fragile. Any leakage of my aura might cause a considerable impact. Then, with a slight sway of her body, she disappeared immediately. Until now, Shangguan Lingxiu's heart was still filled with trepidation. Before the 3 incense sticks were lit, Shangguan Lingxiu's heart was filled with anticipation, but there was still a hint of doubt, disbelief as well as a sense of child's play. After the incident with the 17th Master of the Abyss's Dragon Hide treasure map, Shangguan Lingxiu had firmly believed that there were indeed immortals in this world, powerful beings that surpassed the knowledge of this world's cultivators. However, even if there were immortals, would they come in such a short amount of time? At this time, it had been close to 200 generations of the Shangguan family since the incense was given back then, and at least 5,000 years had passed. It was not just the passage of time, it would not be an exaggeration to say that the world had changed. Could it really come true? Furthermore, just like what she had said, this matter could not be settled in 2 to 3 days. Who would have thought that the immortal would really come before the incense was even finished burning? Chapter 809. Not only had the immortal come, but he had also settled the matter with a few words and set a time limit to bring her away. Shangguan Lingxiu did not doubt the statement that this world could not withstand the power of ultimate heaven and that 4 hours was the limit, but her emotions were in turmoil. There was a high chance that she would be able to sever the worldly affairs of this world once and for all with this trip. She did not know how many years it would be before she could return to this world. Even if she could return to Tianshan by then, it would be a different world. Things would remain the same, but the people would be different. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help but be at a loss as her thoughts raced. It was too fast, too hasty. There was no time to say goodbye and she had to leave immediately? Shangguan Lingxiu was heartbroken as she ran out hurriedly. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she walked. 4 hours? How could such a short amount of time be enough? Her nephews were already on the battlefield of Zio, fighting for the country and avenging their family. It was destined that they would not be able to see each other. However, there were still many people left. Old Mistress Shangguan ordered immediately, all members of the Shangguan family, gather at the front hall. All members of the Shangguan family who are in the capital must return within 2 hours. No one is allowed to defy or delay. Shangguan Lingxiu's private yard. Bai Yixue could vaguely feel the faint, unique aura coming from within, but it was just the slightest contact that made Bai Yixue shudder, as if he had fallen into an icy pit. Subconsciously, he pressed his hand on the hilt of his sword and boosted his cultivation base to its peak, ready to strike at any time. It was obvious that his alertness had risen to its peak. Supreme Cloud and Ji Lingxi were cultivating inside, intending to improve themselves. In addition, the backlash of their cultivation this time was the combined force of yin and yang. Both of them cultivating at the same time was of utmost importance and could not be disturbed by anyone or anything. If they were disturbed by external forces, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yet Bai Yixue could feel his heart trembling. Despite his vigilance, he could still feel the faint aura within. It was unimaginably strong. Compared to him, it was no longer a big tree, an ant, a giant dragon, or a drop in the ocean. It was the difference between a human and a starry sky. The gap between them was negligible. There was no room for comparison. Feng Mafei, who was on the other side, was equally nervous, perhaps even more so than Bai Yixue. Actually, Feng Mafei did not sense the unusual wave of energy in Shangguan Lingxiu's yard. His cultivation base was a few notches lower than Baishue's, so he was not yet qualified to sense the unusual wave. His nervousness was mainly due to fear. Baishue's reaction was too superficial, causing Fang Mafei to feel an odd sensation as well, causing him to be even more nervous than Baishue. Fang Mafei thought to himself, "Boss, oh boss, are you sure that Mr. Nian and the Four Seasons Tower's people have been chased away by you? We don't have the confidence to cultivate in such a grand manner. Look at how Baishue is behaving now. I'm very scared to say it, okay? If there's really an attack from an enemy of their level, we won't be able to handle it even if we risk our lives." He was nervous. Baishue's eyes widened abruptly. This was because he saw a woman in white suddenly appear not far away from him. There was no sign. She had appeared out of thin air. It was an empty space in front of him. There were no blind spots, but the lady in front of him had materialized out of thin air as if she had appeared out of thin air. Furthermore, her appearance did not even cause the slightest ripple in the air. She had just appeared casually right in front of him. Her clear eyes glanced at him softly. Baishue's hair stood on end as he unsheathed his sword with a clang. This was the most instinctive and subconscious movement of an ace cultivator. Almost at the same time, Baishue wanted to ask, "Who are you?" However, he was shocked to realize that he could not move at all. The sword was still glinting coldly in his hand, but he could not move it at all. He could not even utter a word. In spite of this, he could clearly feel that he had not been restrained, his acupoints had not been struck, and he had not been restrained by any special means. Why had he suddenly turned into a wooden statue? He wanted to call out to Fang Mafei to alert him, but he could not do so no matter how hard he tried. From the corner of his eyes, he could only see Fang Mafei at the edge of the roof, holding a long sword in his hand and clenching his teeth as he pounced down. Surprisingly, he was also immobilized. That posture looked like he was about to fall at any moment. However, he was in such an odd position, leaning forward at a 45-degree angle on the edge of the roof, sword in hand, gritting teeth with a murderous look on his face, as if he was about to strike 3,000 miles away. He was frozen. Then, the woman in white leisurely walked over and slowly moved forward. Feeling the surging mystical chi coming from the room, the lady in white chuckled softly. The affairs of the world are unpredictable, but fated encounters often occur. With this fated encounter, it's better not to leave you with this regret. I'll give you some compensation for interrupting your cultivation in order to eliminate a regret. She raised her hands lightly and drew a circle in the air like she was drawing a circle that was not very neat. As her hands rose and fell, a ball of purple chi suddenly rose from the far east where the sun had risen. In the next moment, it had traveled an immeasurable distance and arrived above the small courtyard. It then shrunk rapidly, turning into two glowing purple balls the size of corn grains, delicate and tiny. This is the purest congenital purple chi. There are gains and losses, this is fate. The lady in white smiled faintly. With a flick of her fingers, the two little balls turned into two rays of light and shot into the room. The two amethyst aurora pearls shot out at high speed. One hit Yun Yang's dantian while the other hit Ji Lingxi's dantian. Then they disappeared into both of their bodies. Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi, who were in the midst of cultivation and oblivious to what was happening in the outside world, suddenly felt their dantian swell. In the next moment, with a soft boom, the spiritual chi in their bodies surged at an unprecedented speed, almost uncontrollable. Under normal circumstances, or rather in most cultivation environments, interference was absolutely forbidden. When a cultivator was disturbed in the process of cultivation, it was already a blessing from the heavens if the cultivation was interrupted. It could easily lead to turbulence of chi and blood, disorder of meridians, reverse flow of mystical chi, severe damage to one's cultivation method, or even death due to the rampaging of spiritual energy. What the lady in white had done, condensing the external force and sending it directly into Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi's bodies, was something that should never be allowed to happen. The most direct and most likely scenario was for the two amethyst aurora pearls to self-detonate at their dantian, blowing them up into pieces and leaving nothing behind. They might even be reduced to dust and vanish from the world. In spite of this, the reality was, although both of their chi meridians were fluctuating and showing signs of going berserk, their progress was unusually stable. They broke through a barrier like a hot knife through butter. Then, with another swell, they broke through again. The process went on, and within the span of a dozen breaths, both of them had broken through 3 levels consecutively. They did not even feel the slightest bit of discomfort during the process. The torment and pain that accompanied a breakthrough in their past cultivation were absent. Up until now, the 7 pieces of purple crystals on the ground had not even absorbed 1/10 of the total amount. However, the cultivation process had been cut off automatically this time. Did this mean that the cultivation had been completed? Wasn't this result a little too unimaginable and unexpected? Although Yunyang had some expectations for the cultivation this time, he had initially thought that it would be enough for him and Ji Lingxi to break through a level with their combined yin and yang energy. Never would he have thought that the final result of the cultivation would be to break through 3 levels so smoothly. The result was beyond his expectations and extremely rare. When both of them woke up from their meditation, they saw the dumbfounded look on each other's faces. Chapter 8:10. What was going on? Logically speaking, the cultivation speed in the first 2 hours was already very fast, far surpassing his previous solo cultivation speed. However, it was not too outrageous. At least, it was still within the expected range. It was roughly twice as fast as his usual cultivation speed. According to this cultivation speed, it was expected that he could break through to the next level within a day and a half. This was the result that Yunyang had initially thought of. However, the reality now was, how could it be completed in the blink of an eye? Furthermore, it was a leap of 3 levels. The result was too shocking and defied logic. What is going on? Ji Lingxi was dumbfounded. Could it be that the effect of our joint cultivation is really that good? So strong? The corners of Yunyang's lips twitched. No, this is definitely not the result of our joint cultivation. Although Yunyang had come to this conclusion, he was once again confused when it came to further explanations. He felt that the current situation was inexplicable. How could there be a sudden breakthrough? How could there be such a logic in this world? Not because of our joint cultivation? What do you mean? Isn't this the result of our cultivation coming to an end? Ji Lingxi blinked her large eyes in bewilderment. Could it be that the heavens have opened their eyes, or perhaps our physiques have suddenly exploded? As she spoke, she hurriedly cultivated to check her body to see if there were any hidden injuries. Yunyang coughed. Then he suddenly felt that, why was it so quiet outside? Bai Yixue and Fang Mafei, who were guarding outside, should have sensed the sudden change in their auras. Even if they did not come in to ask, there should at least be some movement. Yunyang's heart tightened as he opened the door to see what was going on. He then saw Bai Yixue standing on the spot, sweating profusely and holding his treasured sword stiffly. On the other side, Fang Mafei had still fallen from the eaves with a plop and was sprawled on the ground, unable to get up immediately. Yunyang was shocked to see this and called out, "Which friend has come? Please show yourself." Everything that was happening before him was not a coincidence. It must be the arrival of a top-notch expert or an unparalleled master who was so strong that it was beyond common sense. A faint, smiling voice suddenly rang out from behind him. "I'm right here. Can't you see me?" Yunyang turned back abruptly and his eyes widened at the sight. It was not because of how beautiful the person before him was, but because of Ji Lingxi. Right behind Ji Lingxi, a shoulder behind, was a lady dressed in white walking out of the room. No, the reality was that the woman was almost sticking to Ji Lingxi, but Ji Lingxi did not even notice it as she leaped out of the room nervously. "Yunyang, is it the Four Seasons Tower's men?" Yunyang sucked in a deep breath, instinctively aware of the woman's power. She was unimaginably powerful, terrifyingly powerful. Ji Lingxi's current cultivation base was a level higher than hers. In terms of cultivation base alone, there was probably no one in the entire Tianshan continent who could compare to her. However, Ji Lingxi did not notice the lady in white who was sticking close to her from behind at all. Moreover, the woman had spoken just now. Yunyang was sure that he had not used any form of telepathy. However, Ji Lingxi did not hear it either. Yunyang said in a low voice, "Good move, sir." Ji Lingxi stared at Yunyang, who was standing right in front of her, and asked in bewilderment, "What do you mean? What nonsense are you spouting at me? It wasn't me who broke through just now. The red glow on me didn't even move. It really wasn't me." Yunyang did not answer, focusing his attention on what was behind Ji Lingxi. Ji Lingxi's mind raced as she sensed something. Turning her head quickly, she cried out in shock the moment her gaze landed on something. She leaped 30 to 40 feet away and landed behind Yunyang, her face drained of color. There was actually someone following her without a sound. Heavens, this is really too scary. The lady in white looked at Yunyang with a smile. Seeing the shock in his eyes but not the slightest hint of fear, she could not help chuckling and complimenting him. "Yunyang, you're not bad indeed." Yunyang asked cautiously, "May I ask who you are?" What business do you have with me? The lady in white seemed to think about it and said with a smile, You're not qualified to know the answer to this question yet. However, I can tell you that I'm Shangguan Lingxiu's master. If you bully my disciple in the future, I won't forgive you. Shangguan Lingxiu's master? Yun Yang was puzzled. Since when did Shangguan Lingxiu have a master? Why did he not know about it? Furthermore, it was a superb master with such ability. That was not right. If Shangguan Lingxiu had such a master, how could her ability be limited to this? This did not make sense either. However, you've subdued my people the moment you've arrived. What do you mean by that? Yun Yang did not want to dwell on Shangguan Lingxiu's matter anymore and calmly adjusted the direction of the question. The white-clothed woman smiled. The person who restrained you is nothing. I'm just here to see you. I don't want to waste my breath and cause more trouble, that's all. If you feel uncomfortable restraining just two of you, I can make the two of you stay still and listen to me. Yun Yang's expressionless face twitched. He wore a faint smile, but his eyes were gleaming coldly. In this continent, I've never seen anyone who can subdue me without making a sound. His body had turned into the form of a cloud, tangible but intangible. Although he looked like he was still standing there, his essence had already turned into the form of a cloud. With Yun Yang's current cultivation base and ability, he was certain that even if the Four Seasons Tower's experts were to attack him together, or even if all the martial practitioners of the continent were to attack him together, they would not be able to subdue him. The lady in white smiled faintly and said, Then I'll let you experience what they feel now. She then raised a hand and grabbed forward. Yun Yang's thoughts raced, a chill rising within him. He dared not rely too much on the formless form of his cloud form. He vanished with a whoosh, turning into a breeze and escaping swiftly. He snorted inwardly, Your cultivation base is strong and difficult to fight, but can I just stand there and let you grab me? How can I be subdued when I turn into the wind and cloud? The next moment, the white-clothed woman's hand followed its original trajectory and grabbed at the air very slowly. She said softly, You're really too weak now. It's really not much more difficult than grabbing an ant. I still have to control my strength so that I won't crush you. She closed her palms and said softly, Come out. Before her words echoed in the air, Yun Yang's formless wind form disappeared at once. He had turned into a tangible form and was pulled out from the void, standing stiffly in front of the lady in white. Yun Yang's eyes were filled with despair. He had no other feelings. Until now, he still did not know how he had been pulled out. There was no abnormality in the spiritual energy wave in the air just now, nor was there any trace of mystical qi. There was nothing when he probed with his deific consciousness. How did I get caught? Where am I? Where am I? Chapter 8:11. Seeing that Yun Yang was defeated, Jilingxi took a step forward and stood in front of Yun Yang without hesitation. She raised her palm and struck at the lady in white. The gust of the palm was piercingly cold, filled with a whistling sound. After her breakthrough, Jilingxi's cultivation base was almost unrivaled in the world. The force of the palm strike was unstoppable. Even pinnacle experts like Ling Xiaozue Duguqiu and Mr. Nian might not dare to face it head-on. In spite of this, the lady in white merely smiled faintly and raised her hand gently to receive the attack. Two slender hands met in the air with a loud bang. Jilingxi could only feel a sudden surge of energy that she could not defend herself against. There was no room for resistance at all. In spite of this, Jilingxi felt relieved instead. You've been tricked. I'm not really going to fight you with my palm strike, I'm going to counterattack with the red light. Seeing that the other party could easily break Yun Yang's unique power with ease, how could Jilingxi not know that she could not be defeated by force? Since she knew that she could not defeat the other party, she would resort to a different tactic. Cheat red light, come at me quickly. A playful smile hung on the lady in white's face as she increased the force of her palm strike. In the next moment, a beam of red light appeared as expected and rose slowly. Jilingxi took 2 steps back and looked at the lady in white in front of her rather smugly. Your looks make me jealous, but you're going to fall in my hands eventually. It had to be said that this was probably the only time in Jilingxi's life that she did not hate the red light so much. The red light's domineering invincibility was deeply ingrained in Jilingxi's heart. Its irresistible characteristic had never failed until now. Even though the lady in front of her was unfathomably profound and had an unimaginably profound cultivation base that was beyond her knowledge, there was no exception. Jilingxi was utterly convinced that her plan had succeeded. She just wanted to see how successful it could be. However, her mouth fell open in the next moment, her eyes filled with shock. However, the woman in white was still calm and relaxed in the face of the red light. With a light smile on her face, she pointed with her slender finger and actually caught the dense red light in her hand. She had caught it in her hand. Jilingxi's eyeballs bulged. What was going on? How could this be? What happened to his domineering, irresistible, and indomitable aura? The woman in white smiled gently and said, "This thing is probably the result of your father's effort. It's a token of goodwill. Parents in the world are always worried about their children." With a wave of his hand, he sent the red light back to where it came from and melted back into Jilingxi's body. Jilingxi was still in a daze, completely unaware of what was happening. Jilingxi blushed and said, "Tell me, what's his name? And who's my mother? Is she still around?" The lady in white said, don't worry. Your father and mother are alive and well. Actually, they miss you every day as well. It's just that it's not convenient for them to come and see you. There must be a reason behind this." Jilingxi grew nervous. What reason? Could it be that they've been imprisoned? The girl's imagination ran wild. Her eyes were rimmed with tears as she said, Could it be that my father and mother have encountered an insurmountable danger? Attacked by a strong enemy, they were captured because they couldn't handle it? Before they were captured, they used the last of their cultivation base to throw me and my brother out? That's why we... The lady in white's eyes grew wider and wider, her cherry lips almost agape. She looked like she had lost her composure. It was obvious that she was stunned by Jilingxi's wild imagination. However, almighty cultivators were almighty cultivators. Soon after, he put away his surprised expression and nodded repeatedly. He even forced himself to sigh and said, "Your guess is slightly biased. However, it is true that your father and mother are not living very well now. Strong enemies are waiting for them and danger lurks everywhere." Chapter 8:12. That was so dangerous. Jilingxi felt the rock in her heart disappear in an instant, replaced by an indescribable sadness and concern. Didn't he have any helpers? It must be because he's not very popular. The lady in white sighed softly. "I can't tell you too much right now. I can't even tell you their names. If I tell you now, it'll only harm you." Jilingxi was about to plead when the lady in white said, "Your cultivation base is still shallow. You've never seen the state of being born and destroyed in an instant. You don't know that a single thought can trigger the sudden inspiration and cause signs to appear. Many disasters that shouldn't befall you are born from this. All in all, as long as you cultivate diligently and raise your cultivation base to a certain level as soon as possible, you'll know when it's time to know. Perhaps when that time comes, you'll really have to personally save your parents from the abyss of suffering," the lady in white said. Jilingxi bit her lip, her heart knotted in knots. Her eyes were brimming with tears, her heart in turmoil. Not good. Strong enemies lay in wait, danger lurking in every corner. In the abyss of suffering. You'll have to save them personally. The information contained in these few sentences was too much and too negative. "I've been wrong about you all this time. I didn't know that your situation was so dangerous. You guys still risked your lives to send us out under such dire circumstances. You even spent so much effort to build that red shield for me, afraid that your daughter would be harmed in this mortal world." Jilingxi's heart was filled with sorrow. Tears streamed down her cheeks like rain, looking pitiful. Cough cough. The lady in white coughed, her expression tinged with awkwardness. "I'm not wrong. Yes, I'm not wrong at all. Your father is being attacked by his brothers now. Almost no one is on his side. Of course, he's in a miserable state. His brothers are all mighty beings in the universe. Strong enemies are indeed waiting for him and danger lurks everywhere. As for your mother is also a ruthless person. She fights with your father every day, so naturally your father falls deeper and deeper into the abyss of suffering. There's nothing wrong with that. As the saying goes, husband and wife are one, inseparable. Your father naturally represents your mother. Since your father is in dire straits, your mother is naturally in there as well. There's nothing wrong with that. All of this, I'm just telling the truth. You're the one who's imagining the worst. You really can't blame me." However, this lass's imagination really broke through the horizon. She was too imaginative, too good at imagining things. "You're actually being hunted down, imprisoned, waiting for rescue, using the last bit of my strength to save you at the last moment? Why didn't he go write novels if he had this kind of imagination?" What a pity, Yun Yang, who was beside her, asked. Then, Auntie May, do you know my father? Aunt May almost held her head and cried out in pain. Did I come here today to answer the questions of you two question babies? And it's all about your father? Your father. I've seen him before. Everything is due to fate and fate. The lady in white expressed her helplessness. It was impossible to say that they did not know each other. Basically, these people would gather together to fight every year. Your father is an old schemer. Actually, it was not only him, there were also the 9 Abyss young masters who talked about justice and justice. They were all old fellows. How are my father and mother now? Yin Yang asked. Are they well? Are they in danger again? The woman in white thought for a moment, organized her words and said, your parents should be together now. There's nothing wrong with this. They're together every day. I haven't said that they're in a love-hate relationship yet. Even if I did, it would be correct. Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi's expressions changed at the same time. From the conversation just now, it was not difficult to guess that Ji Lingxi's parents were trapped by strong enemies and were in dire straits. If Yun Yang's parents were with them, did it not mean that they were trapped as well? Ji Lingxi's tears rolled down her cheeks. So uncle and aunt are in dire straits as well. Why is that? Yun Yang, on the other hand, was filled with doubts. This is different from what my aunt told me last time. Yun Yang said calmly, May I ask, Senior, who captured them? Let us know what's going on so that we won't be unaware when we face our enemies. The lady in white was about to speak when she heard the voice that came from beside her ears. She could not help but be stunned. She then said, I'll tell you through telepathy, but you have to keep this a secret, at least for the time being. You can't reveal anything, not even to each other. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. What I said just now isn't a lie. If you speak here, the other party will be born immediately. Ji Lingxi nodded seriously. I won't reveal anything. I won't say a single word. Yin Yang was thinking, is it true or false? Is it that incredible? Was it true or false? The lady in white said softly, the person who captured your parents is not only immeasurably powerful, but his name is also very strange. His name is the first young master of the abyss. As she spoke, the lady in white could not help saying in her heart, I'm sorry, old black. They all want to blame you, I can't do anything about it. Ji Lingxi clenched her teeth in hatred. Young Master Jiuyu? She enunciated each word, her eyes glaring at him, her hatred seeping deep into her bones. Yun Yang repeated slowly, First young master of the abyss? This name seems rather familiar. The unrivaled expert rumored to be the unrivaled 17th young master of the abyss. I wonder if he's related to this first young master of the abyss? The lady in white said, not only are they related, they're both descendants of the 9 abyss. It's just that the 17th young master is the 17th generation descendant of the 9 abyss young masters. As for the first young master, he's the first generation ancestor and the most powerful one among the 9 abyss young masters. Yun Yang mused and asked, how powerful is he? How powerful exactly? The lady in white pondered for a moment and said, perhaps in your eyes, moving mountains and filling oceans, ascending to the heavens and burrowing into the earth, is already powerful enough. However, this first young master of the abyss ability, how? The continent beneath your feet can be destroyed hundreds and thousands of times by the first young master of the abyss with a stomp of his feet. He can annihilate the sun, moon, and stars with just a puff of air. Life and death with just a thought isn't an exaggeration. The lady in white said slowly. Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi were shocked. Destroy the continent hundreds and thousands of times with a stomp of his feet? Annihilate the sun, moon, and stars with a puff of air? What kind of ability was this? Could there really be such a terrifying ability in the universe? I'm not exaggerating at all. In fact, it's because you two know too little that can be used as a comparison. I'm just giving a rough explanation. This is the reason why an ordinary realm can't bear the power of ultimate heaven. The lady in white's expression was solemn. Therefore, before your abilities are sufficient, don't seek death recklessly. Both Yun Yang and Ji Lingxi wore grim expressions. Ji Lingxi was worried, tears welling up in her eyes as she panicked. Yun Yang frowned, calculating in his heart, is it true? Is it true? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.